Turkey
has just been, not good.
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Kasparian with you guys. Chock full of news today, of course. We got Joe Kent versus Dan Bongino in a war over the Tyler Robinson case. I think that case is it has the ramifications of potentially changing the country and the planet. Yeah, I'm saying it. And that's a very big thing to say, but we'll see as time goes on why I say that. I think that there's, of course, many other things that are going on, all crazy, all chaotic. Israel and Turkey might soon get into a war. I thought that was crazy, but apparently it's very real. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then Donald Trump and Scott Bessent saying, oh, the economy is great, as it begins to crater right around them. That is amazing. And then finally, Natalie Harp, seemed like a silly little story, right? But as it turns out, no, foreign governments are apparently using her, even though she does not have national security clearance. Super dangerous, we'll talk about that later. And then finally, we gotta get to this story later in the program. So the whole thing about, oh my God, there's so much anti-Semitism on campus, utter nonsense. So someone inside the Trump administration explains how they made it up, and that is an amazing story. So Anna, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yep, lots to get to. So let's start on the first story here.
Absolutely. Well,
yeah, okay, sorry, I'll kick it over to you. So Israel just struck a northern Syrian air base, and the Turkish delegation that was there had just left hours ago. If they had hit the delegation, Israel would have triggered a war with NATO, which is insane. And so I thought the Israeli aggression along these lines was just bluffing and posturing for their elections. It turns out that is not the case. Both sides are preparing for a war. We're going to explain that to you throughout the story. I'm going to come back and make some points about how Israel's preparing and Turkey's preparing. I've also figured out why Israel wants this war. It turns out there's an economic reason. So this is a startling development. A country that has started so many wars in the Middle East, Israel, attacking nearly all of its neighbors, now attacks Syria again and would like to start a war against NATO, which would include America. Anna, please explain to us the details of this story, which are unbelievable.
Gladly, but I will say it is not unbelievable. I think we need to get to a place where people are no longer experiencing even a drop of naivete when it comes to the genuine intentions and motivations of Israel. But with that in mind, let me tell you what we know so far. So Israel dropped at least 8 bombs on runways and hangars at the Abu al-Duhur air base in northern Syria specifically. So that's about 45 miles away from the Turkish border. Now, luckily, these Israeli strikes that hit this air base didn't end up killing anyone, but they did do a lot of damage to like the runways, which had just been rebuilt following a pretty devastating Syrian civil war. Now, at first, Israel completely denied that they had carried out this attack. An Israeli military censor, in fact, put a gag order on any reporting in Israel that would confirm that the Israeli Defense Forces had conducted these strikes. And then US Ambassador to Turkey and Syria, Tom Barrack, then goes on X and confirms what we all suspected, that Israel was in fact behind these strikes, these 8 bombs at this airbase in which a Turkish delegation was just at and had just left hours earlier. So let's get to some of the reporting on this. As Tom Barrick wrote on X. He says that we are deeply concerned that the confirmed Israeli airstrikes on the airbase constitute an unnecessary escalation that does not advance regional stability. Now, let me just pause for a second and remind everyone that this is the guy who spoke down to Lebanon, to the Lebanese people on behalf of Israel. He's a major Zionist, hardcore Zionist, always sides with Israel. But in this case, he's speaking out, and he's the one who really confirmed that these strikes happened in the first place. He says the al-Shara government, al-Shara is the relatively new leader and former al-Qaeda terrorist of Syria, has neither adopted a predatory posture nor maintained proxy forces. It has, in fact, repeatedly indicated its preference for de-escalation with Israel. The United States has in the past and will continue in the future to host discussions to encourage diplomatic cadence over kinetic frustration for both nations. Okay, so there he is confirming it. Now, the real question is, why? Why is Israel doing this? Now, Israel later did confess that Turkey was their target. I'm not kidding. They say, Netanyahu in particular says, well, we needed to do like a preemptive strike because we're concerned about Turkey carrying out a military buildup in Syria. A preemptive strike. So nothing had even happened yet, and they admit that. So Israel had attacked the base because Syria was on the verge of breaching an agreed upon status quo in security matters by allowing Turkish troops to deploy there. That is what Netanyahu said in a public statement. Now, Israel is worried that there is a Turkish military buildup happening in Syria, but the Syrian foreign minister says, no, there is no Turkish military buildup. This was in an interview with Axios. He said the following: there was no intention to establish a Turkish base there, nor to establish a permanent Turkish military presence or deploy Turkish forces at the site. There was no Turkish military buildup at the base in any sense that would justify such an interpretation. The base was, in fact, largely empty. And again, going back to Netanyahu's statement, he himself admits that. It's just that he had the suspicion that they were about to engage in a military buildup, and he needed to do something to prevent that. And by the way, I'm gonna go to reporting out of Israel that shows that this is genuinely a strategy the Israelis intend to deploy. So what was the Turkish delegation actually doing there? We should address that. So 2 Syrian officials who spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity said that the Turkish delegation had visited the airbase in the northeastern province of Idlib to basically review rehabilitation work underway at the facility. As I mentioned earlier, they're trying to rebuild Syria after a devastating years-long civil war. Turkey accused Netanyahu of making untenable allegations intended to legitimize Israel's unlawful airstrikes targeting Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Sovereignty and territorial integrity are 2 things that Israel couldn't care less about. Let me just be clear about that, but let me continue with the rest of this. It alleged that Netanyahu aimed to pursue expansionist and destabilizing policies in the region ahead of the elections in Israel. That is 100% true. There's no question about that. Israel's behavior, certainly when they're trying to annex land from Lebanon, when they're trying to take over all Palestinian territory. I mean, they are putting the clean break memo into action. It's been in action for a long time because they do want to expand their borders and carry out what is known as the Greater Israel Project. So this airbase that was struck, the Abu Duhur Air Base, lies at a strategic location near the borders between Idlib, Aleppo, and Hama provinces. There's something else that's incredibly important about this, location of where the strikes happened. So Turkey's communications directorate also said that Turkey will resolutely continue to cooperate with the Syrian government on a legitimate basis for the establishment of peace, stability, and prosperity in Syria, and will never allow the destabilization of Syria. And look, there is a lot of cooperation between Turkey and Syria. For instance, Turkey is assisting Syria in its efforts to rebuild its armed forces, Syria's armed forces. Israel no like that. Israel doesn't want any country in the region to be militarized, and they're very open about that, which is disgusting because who are you to tell a sovereign country whether or not they're allowed to have a military? But let me continue. They train Syrian personnel at Turkish military schools and bases. Turkey also provides Syria with equipment and logistical support. And just last year, Syrian troops took part in military exercises that were held in Turkey. So here in the United States, when Trump was informed about what happened, he didn't really seem to care. In fact, he had absolutely no criticism for what Israel had carried out. All he said was, I can't talk about it. Okay. And Trump has been attacking NATO rather aggressively. Now, you can argue, and I think this is true, Trump attacks NATO for a variety of reasons. He felt that NATO wasn't pulling their own weight, NATO countries, I should say. He felt that NATO abandoned the United States by not helping us in this stupid, moronic war against Iran. And I think these NATO allies did the right thing by staying out of it. He disagrees with me on that, of course. But the real question is Trump looking to pull out of NATO? Because remember, Turkey is one of our NATO allies. And now I want to toss to something else that's really important here. So Israel Hayom is a publication owned by Miriam Adelson. And they put out a tweet today that I think is relevant to the discussion. Let's take a look at graphic 7. Jerusalem has studied not only how NATO's Article 5 operates, but where it applies. The treaty protects Turkish territory. Turkish troops do not carry that territory with them onto Syrian or occupied Cypriot soil. The headline of this piece is titled, Turkey's Strategic Depth is now part of Israel's military calculus. Now, of course, because of course it is. And so if you read the body of the article, here's what they write. Israel did not wait for Turkish troops, aircraft, radar, or air defense systems. It destroyed the infrastructure required to receive them before the threat became entrenched. The operational rule is denial before things are entrenched. Before Turkish troops arrive, the target is infrastructure. Once they arrive, striking it also risks Turkish casualties, retaliation, American intervention, let's pause for laughter, and confrontation with a NATO member. And then finally, there's the economic reason that Israel is doing this, which I'm gonna toss over to you, Cenk, since this is something you teased about.
Yeah, so guys, when I first started reading about how Israel was talking about it attacking Turkey and did you know that northern Cyprus is occupied? I thought this was bluffing and rhetoric, like, oh, you're criticizing us for the occupation, but how about Cyprus? That's also occupied. Relatively normal propaganda, and they view Turkey as against their interests for whatever reason, right? Well, I was a bit naive. It turns out the people running Israel, as we all know in other contexts, are lunatics. They're detached from reality. No, they have made detailed plans to attack Turkey. And they've made, the plans are so detailed, as Anna just explained to you, they already have a plan for where they can kill Turkish troops and where they can't. So they have a legal defense ready. If we kill Turkish troops on land that isn't Turkish territory, they think legally it doesn't trigger Article 5, which means that the rest of NATO has to defend Turkey. So I now also realize in hindsight, looking back over the last 10 and even longer years here in America, the people who've been driving the anti-NATO propaganda, once again, the Israeli lobby. Why? Well, we didn't know it at the time, but they needed to destroy NATO so that they could attack Turkey and not have America and the rest of Europe retaliate. And so that's obviously unthinkable for Israel. And I'm sure that Israel thinks it doesn't matter. We have special exemptions. So if we wanted, we could bomb Paris and America would join on our side and not on the French side. And so they have grown so enormously arrogant that they have detailed meticulous plans on where to murder Turkish troops and get away with it. And here's what's not going to happen. They attack Turkish troops and Turkey does not respond. So they can claim all day long as they do, and the American press, being their dogs and servants, can pretend that it's true, but the rest of the planet doesn't operate that way. So what do they say? They say, well, if we get hit first, well, that's obviously self-defense, and that gives us a right to not only counterattack, but do a genocide and do random wars that are not even related. It gives us infinite rights of self-defense. We could take 70% of Gaza, southern Lebanon for no reason, but hey, it's now ours, etc. But if we attack first, Israel says, like in Syria, oh, that's okay, it's preemptive attack, so that's just self-defense. So whether we get attacked or we do the attacking, it's self-defense either way. And the American media comes out like a bunch of puppets, and you can kiss my ass with whatever trope your accusations you make, but you are, and you sit there and you go, of course it is, it's self-defense. When you murder others and invade others and you attack others like Russia, no, that's not self-defense. When Israel does it, that's self-defense. Well, you're a bunch of liars who are obviously working for Israel to spread their propaganda. And by the way, if you don't know, 1967, Israel attacked all of its neighbors and destroyed their air forces on day one. And then they called it self-defense because it was a preemptive attack. And all of American media lied to you your whole life. And they framed it as, oh, Israel was defending itself in 1967. The vicious Arab neighbors attacked them. That is not true. That is a 100% verifiable lie, and you could look that up. But to this day, you will get anchors on television in America lying on behalf of Israel. Okay, so now that brings us to what the hell are they doing with Turkey? So why would they want to go and attack the second largest military in NATO, even if NATO doesn't respond? It's the second largest military next to the United States and NATO. That is a gigantic military. And they think, no, it's okay. America will back us no matter what war we start, etc. And so why do they want it? Number one, they're not worried about Turkish occupation in Syria. That's what I thought. No, they're worried that Turkey is going to rebuild the infrastructure and the military of Syria. So after Assad was toppled and the new leader comes in, Israel at that point then went and bombed a whole bunch of Syrian military installations. Why? Because they didn't want the new government of Syria to build up any defenses. And they say it. They say, and it's in that article in Mary Madelson's publication, they say, yes, anyone who has a military around us is considered a security threat for Israel. And they say we have the right to eliminate any security threat. So Syria is not allowed to have a military. So if Turkey or Qatar or anybody else is helping them rebuild their own military, Israel finds that an unacceptable security threat, and they have a right to invade, attack, bomb Syria, and kill anyone they like, Syrians or Turks. So this is the ravings of a lunatic mind. So Anna, let me get to the economic point and then I'll come back in, and then I want to tell you about Turkey's preparations, because they're not like us. They understand war is coming and they are prepared. So I thought, okay, it's a rhetorical trick with Cyprus. It turns out, no, they need it for economic reasons. And again, Israel Hayom, Miriam Adelson's publication explains, the waters around Crete and Cyprus are Israel's strategic corridor to Europe. Energy, cables, shipping, and military access through Greece and the Republic of Cyprus. So they are planning a route where their gas fields, Leviathan, and the ones they think that they are acquiring by taking southern Lebanon, which is the Lebanese gas fields off their coast, they're going to take that and the Saudi and other Gulf countries' oil and gas, pass it through pipelines, and then get it to Europe. So that way you don't need the Strait of Hormuz. So the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is blocked is terrible for the United States and for the rest of the world, but it's excellent news for Israel, and Israel's been bragging about it. You're gonna need to use our pipelines, you have to use our route. The problem is that route has to get completed, and Cyprus is part of the route. So they need to attack Turkey and get into a war with them so they could take Cyprus for self-defense and set up their economic route to Europe. So these lunatics think that they are regional hegemons and they could attack any neighbor for just simple economic reasons, just to get richer. And by the way, the war in Iran is not just to destroy Iran. They want to destroy Iran and Turkey, have no regional competitors. But on top of that is also so that the Strait of Hormuz gets blocked. That's not the bug for them. That's the feature so that they could do this alternate route. Anna.
I was just going to go back to, the fact that Israel doesn't want any country in the region to have a military. One of the talking points that you'll hear from Zionists, both Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists here in the United States in the middle of any debate is that, but the Israelis, they made so many offers to the Palestinians. They made so many offers so they can have a two-state solution. But the reality is that they never, and this is intentional, mention the very obvious caveats. One of those major caveats to allowing Palestinians to have their own land, their own country, their own state is you're not allowed to have a military. Okay, so for every American watching this right now, whether you support Israel or you don't, just ask yourself this question. If we were to wake up tomorrow and we have no military at all, do we really have a sovereign country? Aren't we then vulnerable to invasion by anyone who's interested in our natural resources? So when you hear that talking point, understand that it wasn't as cut and dry as they're trying to make it out to be. There was never really a good faith effort to allow Palestinians a chance at self-determination. There was always an effort to crush them by having unbearable, untenable terms, like you're not allowed to militarize. And even in cases in which, there is a concession from the other side. Well, what do the Israelis do? They always change the terms. I mean, we've seen this happen again and again when it comes to negotiating with Hamas. We've seen this happen again and again when it comes to negotiating with Iran. Iran will make all sorts of concessions that you would never believe Iran would make. Then they call Israel's bluff because Israel's still not happy and they want to change the terms of the negotiation. This is what Israel does. And to me, Cenk, look, maybe I'm too jaded. Maybe I'm too black-pilled. I don't know, but one thing I know without a shadow of a doubt is that I'm proven right again and again when it comes to Israel. Whether it's you or Mario Nawfal or all the other people who still feel this weird urge to give Israelis the benefit of the doubt, please stop. Please stop. It's gonna kill us. Okay, because that country will stop at nothing for power, for money, for natural resources. You think it's beyond them to kill Americans? They've been killing Americans. This is an evil country that will stop at nothing to increase its power on the international stage.
So the Americans might be a little bit naive, but apparently, and I didn't know this until today, the Turks are preparing. And I actually learned it from, again, Israel Hayom, the Israeli publication. And so they explained that the Turks have landed a lot more planes in northern Cyprus. And the paper actually pointed that out as a reason to attack Turkey quicker. They said, well, if they land more planes, then it'll seem more aggressive when we bomb them and try to take Cyprus. Yeah, I got news for you. That's gonna seem aggressive either way, okay? And so they're not just, like the Turks are preparing because they understand that Israel's means it and they're coming. And they just did a bombing and they barely missed the Turkish delegation. If they had, we'd be in an international incident now that again is pushing us closer and closer to World War III. So these people are lunatics. So they're saying before the Turks land more planes in northern Cyprus, which is their territory, and you can get into, hey, no, it's occupied, etc. That's an interesting, different conversation, but they control it right now is my point. They're thinking, well, maybe we should attack right away. You're gonna start a war with Turkey right away before they can amass more troops in their own territory that they control? These are again ravings of a lunatic mind, but it's actually happening. So then Turkey, according to Israel Hayom, has also made a deal with Somalia and potentially moving material into there to be able to put in ballistic missiles. So, and by the way, they say this as if Turkey has no right to make any alliances with any other country, have any missiles, any planes, any defense. And Syria was not, this says up and down, and Tom Barak, our ambassador to Turkey and Syria, confirms Turkey was not planning to bring Turkish troops to occupy northern Syria. They're rebuilding the Syrian military, and the Syrian military is saying they're working with us to rebuild our military. And Israel's like, yeah, I know. And we have an infinite right to destroy your military, even though you never attacked us, because we are the kings of this region and we can murder anyone we like at any time. And all we do here in America with our disgustingly corrupt politicians is enable them, enable their worst instincts. Well, of course, sir, here's more money, sir, for more genocides and more wars. Oh, you'd like us to do the war. Of course, sir, we'll do anything you want, sir. And then a bunch of jackals that we have to debate, pretending that Israel didn't take 70% of Gaza, that Israel isn't in southern Lebanon right now, and isn't in southern Syria right now. And we have to debate them that, hey, if they murder people first, is that self-defense? That's not a debate. It's not self-defense. Everything that Israel is doing right now is surrounded by a wall, just this giant circular wall of propaganda brought to you by American media. No, they're allowed to kill anyone they like. They could murder 23,000 children in Gaza, and they're the good guys. And if anyone complains, we're gonna destroy their lives. Well, then you're not an American and you're not a journalist. You're an Israeli marketing asset inside this country, and that's almost all of mainstream media. And you would know all of the evil intentions of Israel if you actually knew the real news, which we're delivering to you now. So Anna, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you say. And honestly, my latest frustration isn't even about Israel's behavior, because I've grown accustomed to Israel's behavior. I'm not surprised by anything they do. What does surprise me, though, is that we have multiple countries in the region led by so-called strongmen who have been sitting around and taking it. And the real question is that paradigm gonna shift? Because if ever there was a time for that paradigm to shift, it would be right now, when the United States doesn't even have the capability to intervene because of how we've depleted our weaponry, our interceptors. Something needs to be done with Israel. Israel is just it is a problem. Let's just put it that way. And I'm gonna ststop before I get myself into more trouble. So let's take a break.
I'll say one last thing, Anna. Look, I don't know anything about the Turkish military or Turkish politics. I cover US and international news. But I do know Turkish nature. And if they think that they're just gonna kill a bunch of Turks, the government officials or the military or whatever, and go la la la, so what? We murder anyone we like, and you won't be able to fight back. You're weak, and we control America, and there's nothing you could do about it. I can tell you right now that as a matter of nature, the Turks will never, ever accept that, okay? Never. And no one cares what anyone else is gonna say. Oh, what did Jake Tapper say? Did he blame us? They're not gonna give a damn. And they will respond, and they will respond with a lot of force. And then Israel will cry and cry, oh, we're the victims. We were in the middle of murdering them, and they dared to fight back. Hey, Jake Tapper and everyone on American media, call them anti-Semites, say they're Jew haters, say that they have no right to defend themselves. Only Israel has a right to defend, to go on offense, to murder anyone they like. Say it, and they could say it all day long. But the Turks aren't gonna care. They're gonna strike back. And then God knows what happens after that, because there are lunatics in charge of the Israeli government. If they use nukes, we will enter World War III. And they are dragging down the entire planet with them. Somebody stop the lunatics.
They live up to every stereotype. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
All right. Let's go to YouTube members. Preston Dragon says, wow, when is Israel going to be labeled a rogue terrorist state? Well, look, brother, they're obviously a rogue terrorist state. They're rogue in that they never listen to anyone, they attack all their neighbors. And they're a terrorist state because they have a worse civilian kill ratio than any terrorist organization. Empirically, they're a rogue terrorist state. There's absolutely no question about it. The only reason why people don't say it is because everyone in American mainstream media knows if you say that, you will be fired on the spot, and your life will be utterly shredded by Israeli terrorists embedded here in America, in our government and in our media. They'll call you an anti-Semite and make sure that you never ever get hired in media again. Everybody knows that. They live under that terrorist threat every single day. That is why our media never criticizes Israel and is constantly kissing their ass and doing their propaganda for them. Because of the terrorist thugs inside this country, the radical Zionists that are terrorizing all of America, including our media. They're not terrorizing our government. Our government is willing, corrupt participants. They take the bribes, and they are the very worst people in the country. And I don't mean Trump and the Republicans. I mean all of the corrupt sons of bitches that work for Israel. That's 94% of our Congress and every president in our lifetime. With it, Gal says, sorry, Obama once disobeyed them and they're still bitter about it. With it, Gal says, Cenk and Anna, I pray you'll have David Crowley on. I'm very concerned about his plans for Wisconsin. Well, we'll try, but people. Anyway, James Mandalore, the damage report with John and Luke was laugh out loud funny today. Thanks for pointing that out. Damage report's on at 1 o'clock Eastern every day on YouTube, on TYT.com. We'll be right back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Mike Galasso. Wow, thank you for the 50 memberships. Really appreciate that on YouTube. You're awesome, Mike. Guys, if you think that those same Israeli first thugs aren't terrorizing us behind the scenes, you're wrong. Of course they are. They attack anyone who dares to criticize Israel, and we dare a lot. So we're one of their top targets for the terrorists inside America who like to terrorize anyone who criticizes Israel, and our media and our government goes along with it. We should get all the terrorists out of our country. And those are the radical Zionists who love Israel and try to destroy any innocent American who dares to actually represent America, our country, instead of their country. And then they'll cry about, oh, you guys called Israel evil. Well, what would you call a genocidal, monstrous state that murders everyone around them? You would obviously call them evil if evil has any meaning at all. Okay, Ground News is one of our partners. I want to tell you about them, okay? So guys, this is exactly the problem, right? We tell you about it all the time. Everybody gives you one perspective, mainstream media especially. So that's why we use Ground News and why I recommend it. It's an app and a website that pulls together reporting from across the political spectrum so you can compare coverage in one place. You can compare headlines side by side, see the biased distribution of the coverage, check the factuality ratings of the sources, and even see who owns the outlets reporting on it. If you want to stay informed without getting played by media spin, I think Ground News is a really valuable tool. Go to ground.news/TYT or scan the QR code you're seeing on the screen. Using our link gets you 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan, ground.news/TYT. All right, let's go to the next story.
Still a registered Republican?
I am.
Do you vote in Republican primaries?
I do.
So you're just not happy with the way the
I'm not happy with, well, the party that I know doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Hopefully it finds its way.
If you could say something to President Trump right now, what would you say?
Resign. You're destroying the country.
Hallelujah. Now tons and tons of Republican voters are saying, what the hell is going on here? We can get anything we bargained for. Now the debt is over 40 trillion, and wait till you see how much of it Donald Trump is personally responsible for. And then today, Scott Bessent came out with one of the most outrageous excuses you've ever seen. Anna's got the whole story.
Yes, Cenk. So this is a story that we covered yesterday, and it's a continuation of how the bond market is a little out of whack, and it has a lot to do with the national debt and our 6% GDP deficit that we're running year after year. So this morning, Americans woke up to stock indexes falling, crude oil nearing $90 a barrel, and of course, the questionable bond market that I referenced earlier. Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's efforts to lower the 30-year bond yield worked, but only temporarily. And so now he's considering printing more money to buy back US Treasuries. And that would, of course, weaken the dollar. So let me go over all of this with you. So the 30-year yield spiked to as high as 5.267%, rising just above the level yields were at when the Treasury Department took action Wednesday, meaning yesterday. So what did Scott Bessent do? He took $4 billion to buy back US treasuries. And he did that to basically try to lower the yield on the 30-year bond. It didn't work. I mean, it worked temporarily, but in less than a day, the yield went right back up. Now, these high yields on long bonds, on the long bond, haven't really been seen since the global financial crisis in 2007. So what does Bessent plan to do now? Well, you're about to see him explain on a CNBC interview. And I should note, after the CNBC interview, markets did not respond favorably. Let's take a look.
Talk us through what you were trying to do here by announcing the increased size of the buybacks.
We routinely do buybacks, and we're going to increase the size of the buyback. And, Sarah, I would note that it could be more than the $4 billion per issue.
Yeah, I was going to ask how big this could get. If the signal here is that you're not happy with the direction of yields, they've gone back the other way. We've erased most of the Treasury rally that you got yesterday with that big surprise. Strong signal from the administration on the buybacks, but the fundamentals are ultimately what is going to prevail here in the bond market, and the fundamentals are hard to ignore when it comes to the size of our debt, with public debt increasing to now $40 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sarah, there's nothing magic about the 40 trillion number, and we can grow our way out of that.
No. We're not going to grow our way out of $40 trillion in debt, especially with the type of spending our federal government does on wars that don't even benefit us, on wars on behalf of a foreign country, Israel, of course, right? You're not going to grow your way out of $40 trillion in debt. Jake, I have to ask you something, because the debt is a huge part of this. Basically, when investors buy US treasuries, they invest in the bond market. It's essentially a loan to the US government to finance our spending, right?
Yep.
How does it make sense for us to take $4 billion and do buybacks of the US bond? Like, how does that make any sense at all, right? And by the way, when I say devalues the dollar, where do you think they're getting that money from? Are we printing money to buy US treasuries?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, the fundamentals that the host was referring to there is our debt and our 6% GDP deficit. Yeah. We need to deal with that. But we don't have government leaders who care about it genuinely. They pretend to. They'll pay lip service to that issue, but they never do anything about it. Back to you, Jake.
So when we buy those our own treasury bonds, it affects supply and demand. And when you affect supply and demand, you affect the price. So you push it in the direction that you want. But that's only short term, because as the anchor there is pointing out, I mean, what are you going to just keep a market from imploding or going in one direction or another just by constantly buying your own treasury bonds? And you could hear her skepticism in her voice, because she's right. That's totally unsustainable. It is a very, very short-term play. So it's a sign of desperation, and that means they're very worried about the treasuries, and they have good reason to be. And so you're going to see in a second, he said something even more absurd, but what they send out Scott Bessent when the markets are about to blow up. And Scott Bessent is trusted by the markets because the markets are run by a bunch of morons who are all insiders, and they play all these games, and they're like, oh, Scotty boy, he's one of us. He wouldn't tell us anything that isn't true. And then Bessent comes out and says absurd things like, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, oh, we already had the deal with Iran, and we're going to announce it. And he said on Monday, we're going to announce the deal by Tuesday or Wednesday. That was 2 weeks ago. There was no deal. And yesterday, Trump said the deal is totally off, totally dead. There's no peace deal at all. Now, did the markets remember? Oh, right. Remember when Scott Bessent lied to us 2 weeks ago, and 2 weeks before that, and 2 weeks before that? No, apparently they don't. Although today, Anna, something different happened. So it seemed like the markets woke up and were like, oh, he's lying about everything. And so that affected oil prices. We'll get back to that in a second. But to finish up this point, so Ray Dalio, one of the greatest investors of all time, is also an interesting character. He is not on the left-right political spectrum. Doesn't really care much about that. He just lives in the numbers world. As Patrick Bet-David would say, he's a numbers guy. So I interviewed him many years ago here on TYT. I talked to him on air and off air. You could watch that interview. And he said, if something else goes wrong in the future, and here we are, we're out of bullets. Like, how much can the Federal Reserve, for example, this is a different trick that they do, buy toxic assets from Wall Street when the bankers screw up? He's like no one even understands what it means for the Federal Reserve to buy assets, or when they sell them to make a profit. Where does the profit go? Nobody owns the Federal. It just doesn't make any sense. And if they lose money, where does that money come from? Well, ultimately us, but this is getting super weird as they're bending the rules of economics, trying to keep this thing together with duct tape, Anna. And based on the market reaction today, I sense for the first time since the Iran war began that duct tape is coming off, and the markets are beginning to wake up and go, wait, are they lying about everything?
Yes, they are. They are lying about everything. Now, immediately after that interview, it was reported that the 30-year bond yield moved upward. So his comments did not inspire confidence among investors. It further spooked investors who questioned whether the United States will make good on its debt obligations in the future. And as CNBC noted, the Dow fell 600 points with stock losses increasing after a Treasury plan to tamp down yields fails. And it did fail, okay? $4 billion did nothing. So since we're talking about $4 billion, let's talk a little bit about the $40 trillion federal debt that we're dealing with, because that does have a lot to do with this situation. The national debt has become so out of control, $40 trillion as of yesterday, Wednesday of this week, that it's now costing us $1 trillion a year just to service our debt. Now that is scaring investors. And if they're going to buy long-term bonds from the United States, right? So a 30-year bond, they're expecting a much higher yield. And that's basically to kind of, I guess, hedge the risk. They see it as a risk to invest in the United States. And so that's become a really big problem. And no one seems interested in doing a damn thing about our deficit, which again is 6%. It hovers around 6% of GDP. And that's extremely high for a developed country during a non-crisis economic period. Like, why do we have such a high deficit? Now, Republicans sure love to pass the buck. So I want to go to JD Vance next, because JD Vance, rather than, maybe taking a little bit of responsibility for how the Trump administration, both in term 1 and now in term 2, have contributed to our national debt, he's decided to blame someone else. Take a look.
Even though the debt is too high, even though we inherited this debt bomb from the Biden administration, we actually do have a plan to get the economy growing faster than the debt. And that's the most important thing.
So it's always just Biden, or it's just the Democrats. And this is why the left-right Democrat versus Republican paradigm is something that we, the people, the American people, need to get our heads out of, because they're lying to you with this false framing. Members of both parties did outrageous spending on wars specifically that have been detrimental to the economic health of our nation. That is the fact of the matter. Biden stopped at nothing to provide hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. He did the same, hundreds of billions of dollars. He spent $21 billion helping Israel carry out genocide in Gaza. So this is not a Democrat thing. This is not a Republican thing. Both parties have totally abandoned the American people. They have sold out our country, and that's the reality of the matter. And now here's what's also really amazing. Obviously, going to war against Iran has been a disaster for the global economy, given the fact that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, given the fact that the Houthis are now striking Saudi ships as they attempt to transit oil through the Red Sea. And so that's going to limit global oil supply. It has already been disastrous. It's only going to get more disastrous as we run out of our strategic petroleum reserve. I am not an expert. I am not a genius. But somehow I can understand this better than Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary. So with that in mind, let's go to that video. This is Scott Bessent claiming, I don't know what's going on. Take a look.
I'm confident that bonds will continue declining. We've got a spike in oil prices today that I don't really understand.
You don't really understand the spike in oil prices? Now, Cenk, I think he does understand the spike in oil prices. He's just playing stupid because he's not a stupid person. So he's just lying to us.
No, that was very poorly received by everyone, left wing, right wing, markets. They're like, the Treasury Secretary doesn't understand why oil prices are up. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. What's complicated about that? Because if he's not lying, oh no, the Treasury Secretary is a third grader. He knows nothing at all. Like the biggest buffoon on Wall Street, but he used to be on Wall Street, in the field of economics, you don't know why price of oil is higher? No. And so obviously he's lying. And so the markets were spooked by that. They're like, oh, okay, now we're at weirdo lies that don't make any sense. So the duct tape is totally off. And we ran that headline for you, Dow was down 600 points. We grabbed that a little bit earlier, right before the show. I checked and nope, Dow is down 700 points. It keeps dropping because none of this makes sense. I mentioned the Ray Dalio and how the government soon will be out of bullets, meaning out of emergency measures to prop up an economy that has a certain natural inclination with these economic forces at play. And we just gave you the perfect example of it. So he buys $4 billion worth of treasury bonds. He says it might be even more. And it has the opposite effect because we're out of bullets. You can't print your way out of this. You can't buy your way out of this. There's no more tricks left in our arsenal. And now even the slowest people in America, the people that work on Wall Street are like, oh, Donald Trump and his team are lying. Oh my God, none of us considered that. Guys, yeah, oil, it's apparently gonna go up because the war's not over. They said it was gonna be over tomorrow. We've given up on the war being over. Did Trump announce it just within the last 24 hours? He said it's over, we're not doing a peace deal. It's gonna last indefinitely. And we think we have the Strait of Hormuz open. That's a joke. Obviously we don't. That's why oil prices are going up. And we're going to try to get Iran to have so much economic pain through our blockade that they surrender. Iran is not going to surrender. They're nowhere near that. They're making more and more demands because the Strait of Hormuz in the real world on this planet is not open. And shocker of shockers, it turns out Trump and Bessent are also lying about that. So I don't know what's gonna happen in the markets tomorrow, but this is now finally getting to the tipping point. And Anna, in terms of the economy and the tipping point, that $40 trillion in debt, it's doing a couple of things. One, politically, it's waking up a lot of Republican voters. Because again, remember, the voters are different than the politicians. The politicians have been lying our whole lives. Oh, we care about balanced budgets. Last Republican to balance a budget, Dwight Eisenhower, okay? They've never told the truth about that. They don't care about balancing budgets at all. All they care about is tax cuts for the rich and wars for Israel. And I'm about to prove that to you in a second. So now the voters are going, oh, they were lying to us. They've never balanced the budget. And we put him in charge to balance the budget, and he did the exact opposite. Then the economic effect is, my God, every year now we're spending over $1 trillion just on the interest. So we keep borrowing the money to do wars for other countries like Israel. We keep borrowing the money to give tax cuts to billionaires. We have to borrow money from China to give a tax cut to billionaires. That is insanity. So Anna, let me just give the numbers real quick. So how much has Trump added out of the 40 trillion? $3.7 trillion during his second term so far, $7.8 trillion during his first term. That's a total of $11.6 trillion, and he's just getting warmed up. That doesn't include the cost of the Iran war that's now going to go into the hundreds of billions. By the way, this is not just Donald Trump. Both parties did the global war on terror. It was not global. It was only in the Middle East and in the surrounding areas. It was actually a global war on Israel's neighbors. And that cost us $8 trillion. And we've given over $320 billion to Israel, and to many other countries. So they've bankrupted us to give all of this money that we are borrowing from others and paying and your kids and your grandkids will pay the interest on the money we borrowed to do wars for Israel, donor class, subsidies for oil companies, donor class, restrict the marketplace for drug companies, donor class, and yes, infinite wars and genocide for Israel. All that paid by you, your kids and your grandkids from here to eternity. And finally, both politically and economically, the American people are waking up from this stupor and going, oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into?
We spent billions of dollars to prop up the Japanese yen recently. And the reason why that happened is because the Trump administration had genuine fears that had we not done that, Japan would sell off US treasuries. That's the horrible situation we find ourselves in, where we're doing bailouts of foreign currency because we're terrified foreign countries that we're indebted to are going to sell off their treasuries.
By the way, though, that's not all. Then the 20 billion, potentially 40 billion to Argentina. Why?
Yep.
Because they're allies with Israel. Oh, come on. Come on. We have no business in Argentina. Why are we bailing out Argentina? Who's going to bail us out? 40 billion, we're in $40 trillion worth of debt. These politicians have been lying to you your whole life. That $40 trillion is money that they stole from you to give to their donors who bribed them. The getaway driver is national media who tells you, oh, no, don't look, it's not bribery. The donors are not in charge. No, they're having debates in Congress, and golly gee, the billionaires in Israel is winning, and the defense contractors are winning every debate. And those are the liars who they send in to deceive you so that they can rob you more effectively.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back.
A spike in oil prices today that I don't really understand.
You moron.
All right, Mr. Kitty writes in, happy Thursday, TYT and Cenk. I was hoping for a shout out because today's my 32nd birthday. Happy birthday, Mr. Kitty. All right, we love our members. Enjoy today, make sure you soak it in. Virginia and South Carolina says, and by the way, enjoy being 32. Okay, soak that in. Virginia and South Carolina says, look guys, it's the famous Lego studio behind Anna. That is true, now made famous. Patience says, I'm glad you're talking about Tyler Robinson again. Thanks, guys. Benji6478 says, Anna, great piece with Candace Owens. So many questions unanswered and something is afoot for sure. So much potential evidence purposely destroyed. Maybe if Cash would have just had his jacket, a lot of this could have been avoided. Okay, that's funny. Okay, yes, yeah. And a great job with Candace yesterday in the bonus episode. If you're not a member, well, all of you are members because you're watching this, but check that out. And if people want to cry about having Candace Owens on or questioning the Tyler Robinson case, go ahead, that's okay, it's a free country. And you don't care about the news and you're a weirdo partisan and you'd like to help foreign countries separate us. Okay, anyways, Tatiana in Japan says, I've been able to watch TYT for almost 3 weeks and I feel so out of the loop. But that's all right, Tatiana, you're back in the loop now. Funkin' for Fun says, if this crap continues, you'll be able to be shot in defense on the grounds that you might be anti-Semitic in the future. I'm worried about it. The oppression is already arrived and only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The more the Israeli lobby loses the debate, more they're going to try to oppress you and take away your freedom and your rights and make sure these American chattel serve Israel no matter what.
A spike in oil prices today that I don't really understand.
You moron.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Faye Smith, 3511. Thank you for gifting a membership on YouTube. We appreciate it. Sneer30 says, a YouTube member says, maybe it's time for us to nationalize our oil and start selling it on the market to pay off our debt. Well, that kind of conversation is going to happen a lot more soon as Fox News goes, no, socialism. We have to give all of your money to corporations and Israel. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. This country's gonna snap. our patience is gonna snap. And then I don't know what happens next, but they better hope that it's political and not something else, because they've stolen trillions and trillions and trillions from us, and we're now very sick of it and totally aware of it. And no amount of mainstream media lies is gonna cover it up. All right, let's go to the next story.
You note in your new article that Natalie Harp never takes a day off, not even a Sunday, right? She is committed and she is indefatigable. How much does Trump depend on her?
She is a specific channel of information, but she is one that he considers very important, and so do other people outside the White House.
All right, the Natalie Harp story has taken a dangerous turn. Before, I didn't care. They have feelings for each other, whatever, man, it's not my business. And a lot of you might disagree with that, that's okay. But now no one can disagree. It turns out foreign nations are using her to get information to Trump, but wait till you find out how dangerous that is. Anna has the whole story.
So it is true that she's basically serving as the middleman between Trump and various foreign leaders. That was information that was relayed to the public by Maggie Haberman in her reporting. So she revealed that Harp acts as a channel for Trump, for foreign leaders, saying that she texts with world leaders on Trump's behalf. Now, Haberman explained this more in depth during a recent interview. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
She serves a specific purpose. In a White House, in a government, there are other channels, official channels of information. You know, she doesn't provide him with his national security briefing, the presidential daily brief. She is not the White House staff secretary, which is supposed to be the last step for paper flow. She's not the press secretary from whom certain media requests are supposed to come. She is a channel by which, as you said, foreign leaders try to reach him if they can't some other way. She has a channel by which he reaches people he sees on television, who he likes what they are saying, or that he will just send out notes to. She is with him so much of the day during those meetings, and she is talking to him throughout the evening about social media posts. So she is a specific channel of information, but she is one that he considers very important, and so do other people outside the White House.
So for the very first year of Trump's second term, this was genuinely a massive problem. And I say that because she didn't have security clearance. Now, she was pressured to get it, and after multiple attempts to get her to finally file the paperwork and undergo the background check to get security clearance, she finally did it. So security concerns about Harp have been raised internally by the Secret Service during Trump's first year back in office for his second term. Some of those centered on her unbridled access to Trump, while others dealt with her failure to obtain a security clearance. So again, she didn't have a security clearance for the first year. She did receive pressure to actually follow through on getting one. Harp declined multiple times over more than a year to seek a routine security clearance normally obtained by West Wing staffers to work at the White House. And so she did finally file the paperwork. She passed the background check. She now has security clearance. Okay, fine. I just think there should be some protocol. There should be something in place to ensure the executive assistant of the president isn't able to serve in that role unless they have the security clearance already. And she didn't, and she was dragging her feet and actually getting it. And look, I gotta be honest with you, Cenk, like I am worried about foreign influence through this woman who doesn't really have much of a background in government affairs or any type of government job. Some people say, who cares, that doesn't matter. I don't know what her expertise is in anything, to be honest with you. So I'm worried about a little bit of foreign manipulation with her at the center of this. But I also want to be clear that there is no evidence that foreign leaders have used her in a nefarious way to influence the president. And if you are worried about influence in our government, we've been dealing with that for many, many decades. And that's the undue influence that a tiny little irrelevant country in the Middle East has over our government. We are an occupied nation by Israel. And if you don't care about that, then please spare me your fury about Natalie Harp.
Yeah, well, I hear you, but I don't know if she's working for someone. And if I'm at the White House and somebody says, I don't want to take a national security clearance, I don't want to go through that process. you escort them out of the building immediately. That's not a question. For number one, if you don't go through that process, you shouldn't be in the building in the first place, so you have to be removed from the building. But number two, what do you mean you don't want to take it? And then you ask her again, and she doesn't want to take it again, and she doesn't want to take it again. Why? Why don't you want to take it? And then we find out foreign governments are using you to get messages to the president and bypassing everyone else. No, that's super weird, okay? So I have no idea which foreign governments, and Maggie Haberman, by the way, why don't you tell us which foreign governments? Like, that's a big deal. That's not a small thing. And if it's like if it's Russia or China, that's super relevant. We should know. If it's Israel or Turkey or Saudi Arabia, also super relevant. We should know. But apparently Maggie Haberman knows, but is hiding it. That's weird. And Erin Burnett and no one else has asked her. I'm asking her, Maggie, which governments? Super relevant. Okay, Anna, you're right. Like, the Israelis don't necessarily need Natalie Harp, and they have the rest of the building. Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Radcliffe, it goes on and on. They're all Israel first, right? Stephen Miller. And so they can get a message to Trump in 1,000 ways. They influence Trump in 1,000 ways. And again, Maggie Haberman is like, I don't see it. What? Larry Ellison gave $5 million to Marco Rubio and wrote a note to the Israeli ambassador saying that he's been approved for Israel. What? I don't know that. I'm not a journalist. What? They give to 94% of Congress. They gave over $300 million to Donald Trump. Netanyahu comes and gives him orders, and then Trump does exactly as Netanyahu orders him. What? I'm not a journalist. I can't see that, right? I get that. But also, Anna, our media is such unbelievable liars that they pretend like, oh, no other governments or our government would do a blackmail operation or a honeypot operation. We have never heard of that. That is a conspiracy theory. No government does that. All the governments are always angels and lovely. They always tell the truth, right? But we know, yeah, it's literally the number one thing intelligence agencies do is a honeypot operation. Now that puts a different spin on Natalie Harp and Donald Trump's relationship. It's one thing Trump falls in love with a young blonde girl, whatever, and she is attracted to his power. That's none of my business. I don't care about that at all, right? But if it turns out that it's a honeypot operation, which by the way, Donald Trump is enormously susceptible to, then I care about it a lot. Which countries, Maggie? And by the way, if you didn't see it, Anna, because it happened right before the show, Melania Trump came out and all of a sudden talked to the press and said, I heard you missed me.
What?
Because I
don't get it.
Because she's coming out and going, remember, I'm still married to Donald Trump, okay? So,
are you?
Yeah, well, yeah, again, are you? But anytime that her role is challenged, God knows what things she's involved in, right? So I don't know if that affects
Melania?
her. Yeah, and if that affects her revenue, right? Her flow of income to her. So she's like, no, I'm the one that's in charge of Donald Trump, not Natalie Harp or someone else. Okay, whatever, but it's, it's a nest of vipers over there.
Well, I mean, look, I've definitely thought this through. She did pass the extensive background checks that are required in order to get security clearance. So she has security clearance. But Cenk, and this is not a good place to be, I admit that. And I wish I didn't have the kind of mindset I do these days, but who signs off on the security clearance? What if something did come up in her background, but it's something that the deep state doesn't think is a big problem and gave her security clearance anyway? I don't know. I just know that I don't trust our government. There's either incompetence or nefarious intentions in our government. That's the problem.
Anna, that's why I'm asking Maggie Haberman which countries, because if it was Russia or China, there's no way in the world it would have been approved. And so the only countries that can get approved, even if they're put someone into the White House and that's influencing the president, they shouldn't pass a security clearance, and they do. Well, certainly Israel's at the very top of that list, maybe Saudi Arabia too, right? But those are the only two that would have any prayer of going security clearance, shut up and put her in and have her, right next to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how the story develops, but I totally agree with you. Maggie Haberman needs to do some more in-depth reporting on this. It seems like she's holding something close to her heart, and I hope she's not doing it for her next book. We got to take a break. When we come back, Joe Kent versus Dan Bongino. What is this fight about? We'll show you when we return.
Oh, what about the children? Give me a break.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Rich and powerful men abusing, assaulting, and abandoning young women. These rich and powerful men donate to the politicians in Washington, D.C., play golf with the elites in Washington, D.C. They are foreign leaders who we don't want to offend. They interact with our intelligence agencies that we don't want to disobey. There is something rotten in Washington.
And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
All those congressmen you just saw there are on the record as protecting the child rapists who were clients of Epstein. They have not prosecuted a single person outside of Epstein and Maxwell.
Yep.
Not one.
Is Trump engaging in this cover up because he's in the Epstein files?
I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff.
So as the government keeps telling us, yeah, there's other people. Yeah, they raped those girls. So what? We're gonna cover up for them. But why are you guys so mad?
A nation that chooses impunity for the rich and the powerful at the expense of our children is a nation that has lost its moral purpose. Are you on the side of the people? Are you on the side of America's children? Or are you on the side of the rich and powerful who've had their thumb on the scales and shafted Americans for decades?
The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one.
Who do you guys use?
We have AT&T.
And how much do you pay per month?
$345, and that includes a company discount.
How many people?
5 phones.
$70 a line, right? I've started a wireless company called Noble Mobile that is trying to cut everyone's bills in half.
What would like a family of 4 cost?
The average Noble Mobile user is paying $42 a month, but also they're using their smartphone 17% less.
Okay, how's that work out?
We give you $20 back in cash every month based upon how much data you use or don't use. You know when you're doom scrolling or messing around on your phone, you're like, oh wait, I'm actually costing myself money right now. The goal with Noble Mobile is to encourage us to look up at our children's lovely faces, like touch grass, appreciate life. A friend of mine calls these things our rectangles of sadness. So we're trying to change that and improve everyone's relationships with their phones.
It's a very noble cause.
Well, thank you, sir. That's what it is.
Been on YouTube for 20 years.
The original political partner on YouTube, the Young Turks.
The Young Turks.
The Young Turks.
Godfather of independent media.
Yeah. Favorite news platform by far. Oh, it's not even close.
The Young Turks. It's the largest online news show in the world.
I watched you guys before I had a channel at all.
So. And I watched Cenk, so Cenk's really the start of it all.
Big shout out to Cenk from Young Turks.
Cenk Uygur, founder of TYT, a man who probably needs no introduction.
Cenk, so great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, David.
Fan you worked for a long time, man.
Anna Kasparian is one of the most followed and influential progressive women online.
I love Anna.
Your presence has been essential for me to really grow.
Do all of you know the Young Turks? This is why what Young Turks are doing is so important.
I've watched you for many years. You are insightful. I thank you for that.
I was going to introduce myself, but it sounds like you guys might know us.
I don't know. Be sitting pretty, looking cool, sitting pretty.
Turkey.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and all you wonderful people, including Cheesy Fingers 79, funny handle, but golden heart. We appreciate you gifting 5 Young Turks memberships. So we appreciate. Oh, by the way, look, the victories keep piling up. So on Tuesday, Angie Nixon won her race. She only had $60,000, and it's a Senate race for a Democratic primary. My guess as to why, and I did a live video about it, is because she was against AIPAC and Alex Vindman was for AIPAC. Oops, there goes all your money. So keep buying this because it's getting filled up real quick. New AIPAC Tears mugs are up on shoptyt.com. And by the way, so is this. This is the new shirt we got up there, the War Party, and it's a elephant and a donkey, same thing, right? So shoptyt.com, check that out. It's another good way to support the show. All right, let's go to the next story. Podcaster Dan Bongino thinks he's a tough guy and he's gonna pick a fight with Joe Kent. So he resigned from his role as deputy director of the FBI, Bongino did. And now he's going around saying, oh, believe the government, there is no deep state. The government is so honest and wonderful. And don't look into Charlie Kirk's assassination. So him and Joe Kent went back and forth a couple times online. It was a good brawl. Anna's here to tell us all about it.
Yes. So what really stands out to me about this story is how Dan Bongino, who resigned from his post as deputy director of the FBI because he was getting a lot of backlash for his part in engaging in the Epstein cover-up, like he's been crashing out over Joe Kent merely talking about his experience serving as the Trump administration's counterterrorism chief. He said that he was looking into possible foreign ties into Charlie Kirk's assassination, and that was shut down, which is what led to Dan Bongino spiraling. So for context sake, I'm gonna go back and show you what Kent said, how Bongino attacked him in March, and then I'll show you the latest attacks. Let's start with the first video. This is Joe Kent.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
no, I don't think you are.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, that the Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again.
So that was the claim that Joe Kent made. That was a mix of claims and also fact, because Charlie Kirk absolutely was against the war in Iran. And ahead of the 12-day war, he did visit Donald Trump and basically dissuaded him from engaging in a long, drawn-out regime change war against Iran. And honestly, it worked. I mean, the 12-day war, you could argue he still went in and did a little bit of bombing. However, we didn't get sucked into a long war until, of course, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and then months and months later in February of this year, Trump is convinced by the Israelis that attacking Iran and carrying out regime change is gonna be a cakewalk. Trump does it, and here we are. How many months has it been? I mean, months and months later, we are still at war with Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The global economy is tanking. You guys get the picture. Now, immediately after Kent said that on Tucker Carlson's show, Dan Bongino was already on the attack in order to defend the FBI, defend the Trump administration, and attempt to pour cold water on Kent's claims. Take a look.
Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all.
Okay, listen, folks. This part I have to just leave here. This is some of the most disgusting, unethical, and immoral stuff I have ever seen. Leveraging the death of my good friend, his brutal murder, his assassination that the whole world watched in all of its horrifying gore. For your podcast appearance, you're disgusting. Thank you for your service to the country. You're also disgusting.
Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office.
He did? That's fascinating because I've had conversations with Charlie too. I don't talk about them because the man's dead and I don't like to invoke his name for podcast clicks, okay? Only to remember him. And I'm not going to do it now. You sure that's how Charlie felt?
Okay, so right off the bat, Dan Bongino has no credibility whatsoever. And why do I say that? In regard to Kent's claims that he was shut down from investigating potential foreign ties in the Charlie Kirk assassination, all Dan Bongino did was appeal to emotion. He made no argument. He just called Joe Kent disgusting, and that was it. And then he immediately follows that up with one of the most brazen lies about Charlie Kirk I have ever seen. Because whatever you might think about Charlie Kirk, especially if you're on the left, one thing that is undeniable, because he was on the record repeatedly, he was against regime change war in Iran. He was vehemently against that. And I wanna just show you the receipts. Let's take a look.
Let's do some updates about Israel and Iran and potentially the United States. On one side is the Lindsey Graham, John Bolton types, where they are actively calling for regime change. Here is Lindsey Graham. This is just lunacy. This kind of analysis is not helpful. This kind of approach, this kind of argument, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons at this point. This is now that we want to go all in and take out the regime. It's time for us to close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen and start a new chapter in the Middle East. And that sounds good, doesn't it? But what have we learned when it comes to wars, and especially wars in the Middle East? What you draw up on a whiteboard rarely happens. What you think theoretically is going to occur, there might be unintended and unforeseen consequences. Going to take out the Ayatollah. Oh, really? What comes next? What comes after regime change? Might be, oh, well, we need a small number of US troops to support the new regime. We have seen this play before. Regime change, you have no idea how this is going to work out. You have no idea.
And Cenk, those were just two examples of Charlie Kirk going on the record in various broadcasts and saying, I'm against the idea of going to war with Iran. I'm against a regime change war with Iran. He has said it repeatedly, and Dan Bongino flat out lied to his audience. Now, before I show the newest attack Bongino carried out against Kent and Kent's response to it, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so if you're trying to decide at home, well, okay, one guy's saying one thing, the other guy's saying another thing. How do we know who's telling the truth? Well, you know that Dan Bongino just lied to you and said that Charlie Kirk was for the Iran war. And you saw with your own eyes that's not true, but there's overwhelming other evidence as well, by the way. Texts from Charlie Kirk to Brett Weinstein that have been released where they talk about how they're desperately trying to stop the war, but the neocons want it really bad. If you don't know, some of those same neocons funded Talking Point USA to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And they didn't fund it for, Charlie to say that he was against the war. They funded it so that Charlie would say that he was for the war. Now, he wasn't following those orders. Now, there's one other thing that Joe Kent said there that, Anna, that I thought to be very interesting, which was at some point he talks about how, there were other people who said that, talked about the Charlie Kirk assassination the day before he was shot and killed. And Joe Kent is saying those leads were not followed up. Well, I mean, if you don't follow those leads, then my lead is that it might be you, right? And so if the government isn't following up on what either people who said that he was gonna get killed the day before and is not following up on possible international connections, which Joe Kent has also talked about, then obviously I question the government itself. And what is the government? Who is the government? Who's making these decisions? So before I have to confess, and this is my apologies, guys, that I was dismissive of the idea of a deep state, but no, there's definitely a deep state. And they're making apparently these unilateral decisions, and I'd love to know who's in it, who's responsible for that. And of course, since Dan Bongino was in the chain of command that made those decisions, he's got every incentive to lie to you and say, oh, there's nothing wrong here at all.
And by the way, it's not lost on me that when it comes to really investigating the Charlie Kirk assassination and wanting answers about some of the inconsistencies that have come up, it's always the exact same group of people who defended the Trump administration in the Epstein cover-up. It's always the same group of people who are favorable toward Zionists taking over our foreign policy. It's always the same people. And honestly, that alone makes people suspicious about what's going on here. You know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I mean, look, I'll name names.
Pattern recognition is not allowed, okay? You're not allowed to notice patterns that are emerging again and again and again. But here's what I want to know to all the right wingers who have fallen into the talons of the neocons. Don't pretend like you cared about Charlie Kirk, because if you cared about Charlie Kirk, if you wanted to get to the bottom of the truth and know exactly what happened, you would want a robust investigation. Instead, you're engaging in this effort to shut down any questions, any attention being paid to those inconsistencies. And it's just very suspicious to me, incredibly suspicious. And Dan Bongino built his reputation, his name, his fame on doing broadcasts about the Epstein files, doing broadcasts, wanting answers about these things. Then he becomes the deputy FBI director, engages in that cover up because once you're in, that's it. You have to acquiesce to the corruption. He got embarrassed and is like, oh, I miss being a podcaster, and thought that he would be able to quit and then restart his podcast with the same audience. But no one trusts you anymore at all because you're a phony, you're a fake.
Yeah, look, we're telling you what reality is. We're not telling you that we have some secret evidence or can prove who did it, right? So, but is it the same Ben Shapiro and Israel First guys who told us, oh, the Epstein files are not important? They're just, you gotta move on. You gotta move on from the Epstein files. And now they're saying, you gotta move on from the Tyler Robinson case. It was definitely a left winger. It's just one guy, just one guy, just one guy. Please move on. Okay, yeah, we are noticing that. That's weird. Like, why are those things even connected? Why do you all in unison have the same point about the Tyler Robinson case and the need to move on from the Epstein files? So it's strange. That doesn't prove that any particular person or entity did it. But I'll tell you right now, there's already a million question marks, and these are not like, oh, maybe, kind of, well, can a plane fly at that trajectory? Can steel melt at that? No. There's a million gigantic, enormous questions here, right? For anyone paying attention. And so this Tyler Robinson case could be, country changing, planet changing. That Tyler Robinson case is not going to go smoothly.
No.
Yeah. There's going the whole thing can unravel from there.
I just think, we've now seen multiple examples of evidence tampering, including, the SD card being taken out of the camera directly behind Charlie Kirk. Terrell Farnsworth, who runs audio and visual for Turning Point USA, took the camera down, took the SD card out. Initially, he claimed that he did so because he was worried someone would steal the cameras. But not only did he leave the camera there, taking the SD card and putting it in his pocket, he didn't even tamper with the other cameras at all. He didn't take the SD cards out of the other cameras. He left the other cameras on the set. Very strange behavior. But if you want more details on that, check out my interview with Candace Owens, because we walk through all of that with our audience. Now, with that in mind, I want to go to the latest attack. I do not know why Dan Bongino wanted to revisit this, but he did recently, and he decided to attack Joe Kent's claims by positing that his role as the counterterrorism chief did not give him authority to investigate what he wanted to investigate. Take a look.
One more. Here's a quick one for you. ChatGPT's like, in case you're stupid, it doesn't say that, but like, here in shorthand, FBI is the investigative agency with compulsory legal authorities. NCTC is there for intelligence fusion and interagency counterterrorism coordination. I was blocked from conducting an investigation I had no authority to conduct whatsoever at all. I guarantee you this, flags all over in the chat, guaranteed. If Joe Kent were to come out tomorrow and say like, I love the Jews and I don't hate Israel anymore, I guarantee you every single person telling you they trust him and is telling you the truth, despite the fact that he's obviously lying, every single person would turn on him and go, that guy's full of crap. He had no authority. Look at it, it's right there. And any AI system can tell you that. NCTC doesn't investigate anything. Can someone just ask Joe that? What exactly was your investigative authority?
Oh, I asked ChatGPT to tell me whether or not the counterterrorism chief has the authority to investigate potential foreign ties in carrying out an assassination of an American citizen on US soil. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. Like, this guy thinks we're morons. So, and by the way, the other thing that I'll just note is, why are you bringing Jews up? Like, no one's having a conversation about Jews. Like, we're not having a conversation about that at all, but he decided to do that because that is the trick that gets played in an effort. It usually fails these days, luckily, in an effort to discredit the person who is raising, in my belief, a legitimate concern. Now, Joe Kent responded to him. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
NCTC analysts are a part of every joint terrorism task force throughout the entire country. The JTTFs are typically led by the FBI. NCTC's role within the JTTF is to determine if there is any foreign nexus. So that would be a foreign country, a foreign government, a foreign individual, a foreign company. If there's any foreign connection or nexus to an act of domestic terrorism, like the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So that's what NCTC analysts were doing as part of the JTTF to assist the investigation of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So NCTC analysts were operating at the request of the FBI to determine if there was any kind of foreign connection or foreign nexus to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. NCTC was formed after 9/11 because of the failures of the CIA and FBI and their inability to communicate prior to 9/11. So NCTC has that unique role. That's why we're part of the JTTF. So at the request of the FBI, we were looking to see if there was any kind of foreign nexus or connection to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. In very short order, we were told that our services were no longer required, that we no longer had access to the repository the FBI had where all the information on the investigation was being kept. And then the FBI said shortly thereafter they were going to hand over the investigation to the Utah law enforcement.
And Jake, I went back to read some of the reporting on this because if you listened carefully, he said that at first they were tapped by the FBI to look into a possible foreign connection, and then in short order it was shut down. And I remembered that in the New York Times there was reporting about how Kash Patel, the FBI director, is the one who shut it down. I learned some other interesting details about what happened afterwards, including the fact that there was a White House meeting that included Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the person that he reported to when she was the director of national intelligence, Susie Wiles, JD Vance. So they're all there. And it was apparently so tense that very little got accomplished. The Counterterrorism Center gathered material from intelligence agencies about potential foreign ties to Robinson and has also looked at foreign funding of people who identify with the far left movement known as Antifa. And what's really interesting here is think about what the narrative was immediately after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. There was, in my opinion, based on the statements made by Trump administration officials, there was an effort to not only use his assassination to create division and rage between left-wing voters and right-wing voters. It was going to be used as, or exploited as an excuse to strip what they deem as left-wingers, strip their rights by saying, well, they're dangerous, they might carry out another assassination, that kind of thing, right? But it's just really interesting because when it comes to investigating Antifa and possible foreign ties to Antifa, Trump administration is all about it. When it comes to looking into whether there were any foreign ties in the Charlie Kirk assassination, well, that gets shut down real quick.
Yeah, so here's another interesting thing. Joe Kent never said a single word about Israel. Right, and the Israel First guys immediately come in and start bashing him, but he didn't say anything about Israel. By the way, when he said they didn't let me investigate a potential international connection, I mean, the press is constantly talking about how Iran is planning to kill Trump. So wouldn't your first instinct be like, oh, was it Iran? Oh, was it one of our adversaries? Was it Russia? Was it China? Was it Al-Qaeda? Who was it? No, their first instinct was, Joe Kent's a liar. Oh, wait, that's super weird. Super weird. And now what does Dan Bongino do? He comes in and he's like, oh, you know, remember Borat with the throw the Jew down the well? This thing that he did and, you know, making fun of anti-Semitic tendencies, etc. Now it's hide behind the Jew, right? So they're like, put up Jewish people as defense, but it's not working because most Jewish Americans aren't on their side. And by the way, now finally, a lot of Jewish Americans are getting sick of being used as like these props and decoys and they're like, why do you keep saying that we're in favor of a genocide? We didn't sign on to this. We're not Israelis, we're Jewish Americans. And why do you keep saying like, oh, when someone says, hey, maybe Tyler Robinson, we should do a bigger investigation, and you say, hey, they're anti-Semites, what the hell are you talking about? We didn't kill Tyler Robinson. What are you insinuating? What are you, nuts, right? Because this isn't about a religion. This isn't about Jewish Americans. This is about Joe Kent saying a foreign government might be involved. And he didn't specify which government. But now, you know, when all the radical Zionists in the country shout, you know, go on a witch hunt against Joe Kent at the same time, and then Dan Bongino starts using the old trick, well, I'm not gonna debate any of the points, and I can't prove my point at all, but you're all anti-Semites. Well, we've all seen that movie before. That movie comes from the radical Zionists whenever they're trying to hide anything Israel's done. So am I saying we should look into Israel now? Yes, I am saying it. By the way, we should look into every foreign country that might have been involved. And what's funny about Israel First is always they're like, no, we want special exemptions. Like if we found out there was evidence that Iran might be involved, would they say, no, you shouldn't look into that? Well, no one in their right mind would say, no, don't look into that. Or whether it was Canada or again, Cuba or whatever, we would all say, of course you should look into it. But they're saying, but if it's the allegations are about Israel, that's the one country you should not be allowed to investigate.
Yeah, and that's super convenient for Israel, which is a country known to assassinate people in sovereign countries and get away with it on a regular basis. So
they're kind of famous for it. I mean, if you say that they can't, they don't.
Reputation. Take the reputation. You act that way. You earned the reputation. So where does a badge of honor and revel in it instead of pretending like you guys are so innocent and sweet? Oh, we're always the poor victims. You're not. You guys are assassins.
Yeah.
And we all know it. That's why people are suspicious. And it's also super suspicious that Netanyahu was all over US media on the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, talking about how Charlie Kirk was the greatest friend to Israel. Please, we gotta go, Cenk. We gotta take a break. We'll be right back.
He killed himself.
I mean, come on, guys. Come on, please.
All right, let's read a couple of X comments because we're on there as well these days. I'm speaking, says amazing coverage. Keep up the good work, TYT. Thank you. Brett Hepp says Israeli tourists have been caught causing chaos all over America and Europe. They must be arrested and charged. Also in Argentina. I don't know what they're doing. The country's lost its mind. Anyways, we go to Super Chat. History Speaks to YT says, pro-Palestine students and student orgs are being sued for creating unsafe campus environments. The plaintiffs are also trying to get federal civil rights laws to recognize Zionists as a protected group. Madness.
Pathetic, pathetic. It's a political ideology of Jewish supremacy that is so pathetic. It is not an immutable characteristic or trait. It's just it's so pathetic. You people are so pathetic. You like to slaughter innocent people and then play victim. Disgusting. Anyway, back to you, Cenk.
Yeah,
can't stand these people.
It's a form of nationalism and nationalism.
Supremacy.
Yeah.
Say the word supremacy.
Yeah. So either way, that is not something you're born into. It's something you make an active decision to adopt as an ideology. And you could be a radical Muslim, and that's an ideology that you develop, or you could be a radical Zionist and decide that Israel is. And Israeli lives are the only thing that matters in the world, and Israel should be allowed to murder everyone around them, and they should be allowed to occupy people and oppress them and humiliate them and enslave them and never ever let them be free. But the radical Zionists say, yeah, we have special privileges. We're the chosen ones.
Turkey.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. At 8 o'clock Eastern on The Revolution, I'm going to interview 3 American doctors, a Jewish doctor, a Muslim doctor, and I believe one with no faith, but we'll ask them. They all went to Gaza, and what they saw horrified them to their core. There's a movie about it now, and we're going to talk to those doctors at 8 o'clock. Now let's go to our next story.
Effective immediately, I am removing all data center projects from the fast track permitting program.
Governor Josh Shapiro isn't the only Democrat pushing back on the data center boom. Far left members of their party make their battle against them a central part of the populist platform. Watch.
We are announcing legislation to impose a moratorium on the construction of new AI data centers until strong national safeguards are in place.
They are racing to construct thousands of giant AI data centers and jacking up the utility costs of everyday Americans to pay for it.
I stand with local and state elected officials saying that we cannot approve any more of these until we have federal level guardrails.
But could turning AI data centers into the left's boogeyman be putting America's race for AI dominance at risk?
Oh, I love it.
Well,
yeah, Fox News now saying, oh, yay, rah, rah, data centers are terrific. And if you're against data centers, you're a far left populist. Please give us more voters. Anna, tell us the whole story.
No, most American voters, left and right, actually totally love the data centers. They love seeing a giant spike in their energy bills. They love to see water wasted. I mean, they love to see these big, ugly, boxy buildings that take up many, many acres of land in their states. They love it. They totally love it. Okay, so here's what's really fascinating about the segment that you just watched. It aired only hours after the Senate Republican campaign arm sent out a dire warning to AI companies. And their warning was, yo, you guys have a PR issue. People don't like you, so you need to do something about it, okay? They write, the National Republican Senatorial Committee says Democrats have made data centers a centerpiece of their campaign to defeat Senator John Husted. I didn't even know this guy existed, and that it's working. Let's just pause for a second. I'm sure many Republican voters also didn't know that this guy existed, which means that he's doing nothing for you. So like this effort to save members of your party in Congress is just so hilarious to me. Like, put in the work. You got to do it whatever it takes to protect your party, even though they screw you over and do nothing for you. But anyway, the memo continues to say if he loses and data centers get their blame, politicians across the country will take notice and they will not go near the next one. This has become a sleeper issue for the entire election. Republicans say in the memo, which was headlined Ohio Data Center Risk, that it's up to AI companies to improve perceptions of data centers by explaining who benefits. Oh, we know who benefits, who pays, and why a community should want one. Until that happens, the issue will continue to dominate this race. Now, let's watch a little more of that Fox segment now that we know it aired on the same day that this memo was put out. Take a look.
I think this is a grave mistake. This is a national security issue that's turning into a local zoning issue. And I don't know anyone, if you've ever been to a homeowners meeting that's run well, they never are. And now we're putting politicians in charge of a technology that very few of them ever understand. And it's moving too fast. And I would tell you, we've been here before, right? Remember 5G and cell towers? Nobody wanted them in their backyard, but they wanted 5 bars of coverage. Same thing here playing out with data centers. People are afraid of what's gonna happen. They talk about the cost. But here's the funny thing. When it talks about water usage, your local Olive Garden uses as much water as an average data center. So I don't hear anyone opposing Olive Garden on their water usage and bill going up. They should, because it's not real Italian food.
Cenk, I just think this story is so amazing. So the discussion ended with more fretting about whether or not China will beat America in the quote unquote AI race. And this is what they're doing to basically sell it to the American people, right? The boogeymen, that's China. We need to be afraid of China when it comes to AI development. So please give up everything in order to make AI happen, including your quality of life, your energy bills, all of that stuff. Let's take a look at the next part of the segment.
So we're in a race with China.
Absolutely.
And you can look at the numbers, right? AI inventions, China, 38,000 compared to over 6,000 for the US. Patents, 38,000 to 6. You see what we're seeing here, by the way, robots installed, 276,000 to 34. China isn't dealing with any of this. But I wonder if ultimately, forget the scarcity of chips, forget China trying to go without being held back in any way, if the rising opposition to data centers in this country is one of the biggest threats to our development in achieving dominance.
Yeah, as you see here, I mean, China's building out capacity while the far left's building out opposition. The saving grace is federalism here, right? Different states have different laws and rules. So while New York and other states may pass moratoriums, which will ultimately damn them and drive up real electricity costs and keep them out of the data center race, I think this administration, the president, is very rightly focused on making sure there are plenty of data centers built here. There's over 4,000 planned right now on top of the 4,000 that already exist.
Who benefits from AI and the data centers? Is it the American workers who are poised to lose their livelihoods over the development of AI, which will replace humans with robots? Is it, I don't know, the American people who still enjoy a little bit in terms of privacy rights? Now, I mention that, Cenk, because China does have an advantage over the United States in the development of artificial intelligence. And that advantage was actually something that came up during a panel discussion at the World Economic Forum. I think this discussion is a foreshadowing of what's to come. Let's go to E4.
Now, if you ask the big G's in digitalization and the big spenders in artificial intelligence, and just for memory, to develop a frontier model today requires about $1 billion. If you ask them what they need, they will say access to data as large as possible. They will say scale in order to really amortize the investment cost of the development of models. Now that would be significantly jeopardized if we have limited access to data because of different privacy laws around the world. And I would contend that this can only be remedied by a degree of cooperation that is going to be a factor of willingness of people to accept and tolerate different paradigms, different cultural preferences, and different views of the world.
I think for the Western economies, if we don't cooperate, if we don't scale, China wins. There's enough population there. Privacy laws are obviously quite different there, and so the data that they can accumulate, which is giving them a dramatic advantage. And I think that's going to be one of the big overwhelming things. When people ask me, are we in an AI bubble? I said, I think there are going to be some big failures, but I don't think we're in a bubble. But that being said, I would much rather say that we need to spend more money to make sure that we're competing properly against China.
So in case you missed it, let me decode that conversation for you. They want to make sure that US and Western AI companies have unlimited access to our data. So they can, have the same advantage that China has when it comes to developing their AI models. So your privacy rights, goodbye. They're going to find a way to dismantle whatever's left of it. Okay, and by the way, I can't emphasize enough that what the Republican Party is attempting to do here with the memo that they put out and with Fox News following through is to turn the AI issue into a culture war battle. This is not a partisan issue. And if you look at the data, if you look at polling data and how Americans feel about these AI centers or these data centers, you'll see that there's actually some agreement across the board politically. Let's take a look at this chart. This is from Gallup. So this March poll from Gallup shows that a majority of Democrats, Republicans, and independents somewhat or strongly oppose data center construction. The dark red sections indicate strong opposition. The orange sections indicate those who somewhat oppose, and then the light green indicates those who are somewhat in favor. So the dark green part only shows those who are strongly in favor, which includes only 9% of Republicans. 9% of Republicans strongly favor AI data centers. So I give you that information, Cenk, because it's very clear that at this moment, this is not a culture war issue. This is not a partisan issue among the American people. But the powers that be want to turn it into a partisan issue. They want to get Republican voters to turn on, left-wing voters when it comes to something that right now we all agree on.
Yeah, and so look, I'll add up those numbers for you. Democrats 75% opposed to data centers. Independents 74%, nearly identical. That's 3/4 of independents. So that issue is already over in terms of the electoral effect of it. And they're trying to, as Anna pointed out, bring it back with propaganda. But the most devastating one of all is the Republicans, 63% already opposed. So you can go, look, if this keeps going, then and China doesn't work, they'll bring in the Russians. If the Russians don't work, they'll bring in the Muslims. No, the Muslims hate the data centers. If we don't want the terrorists to win, you have to pay more for your electric bill and pay the cost of the data centers, even though you're getting none of the profits. Wait, what? What does this have to do with any of that stuff, right? So guys, but what's to me is the most interesting part of this story is you're getting to see how the sausage is made here, the axis of evil. So the guys in the fancy suits that you saw in that last video talking in highfalutin language, they look so professional, right? Like, oh, well, I do declare it's all the Chinese fault. We have to build more data centers, and that's an absolute necessity. And of course, we all agree, data centers, data centers. They're the ones who are gonna profit from the data centers. So then what do? They communicate with the politicians. And I think that memo from the Republican Party is just a perfect piece of evidence for it. The Republicans are going and telling their donors, which are their bosses, hey guys, I'm so sorry, Mr. Smithers, but we have a problem here. Please don't attack me. Please keep bribing me, but you're super unpopular. And we've tried every kind of lie, and it's not working. Even our own voters don't agree with us. All of us loyal servants to you will lose, and then you won't have your servants anymore. Can you please do something about it? And the corporate donors, the AI donors are like, no, shut up. The idiot politician. All right, Fox News, get him on the phone. Okay, Fox News, now go out there and do propaganda. Say that the Chinese are gonna win unless Bob and Susie in Missouri pay my bills for me. Hey, data center companies, I have like a super simple idea. Before we even get into all the 1,000 other problems, why don't you pay your own goddamn bills? You go into a community and you're gonna make the average citizen pay your bills for you? What kind of ludicrous? See, Anna, what happened was they've been robbing us for the last 40, 50 years, right? And so that's why we have $40 trillion in debt now. All of that went to the donors. It went to the defense contractors, the subsidies to oil companies, to Israel, to endless wars, right? And they've been robbing us to pay their donors the whole time. But this time with the data centers, the robbery just got a little too obvious. They're like, oh, we'll go in your community, and instead of us paying our costs, you'll pay our costs for us. Now they do that with climate change in reality. Those hurricanes and the severe storms hit, and then ExxonMobil was like, I ain't got nothing to do with it. I keep the profits. Now, American people, you all pay for the costs. But when you do it this obviously, and your electric bill goes from $50 to $200, and you go, what the hell happened? Why am I paying an extra $150 every month? And they go, because data center moved in, and now you have to pay for their costs. Oh, am I getting some of their profit? They're trillions in profits? No, shut up and pay their costs. A Republican, and by the way, before Democrats have been good on this one. But the corporate Democrats would have loved to have participated in this, but the hand was caught in the cookie jar real quick on this one. And Fox News is telling you one thing that's true. The populist left has been against the data centers from day one, okay? So now you saw their last stand there. So they bring the guy onto Fox News. They're all puppets. The politicians are puppets, the media's puppets. And so that guy comes in and goes, oh no, it's okay, we still have the red states. Oh, federalism is the answer here. We just move all the data centers to the red states. Now, why do they want to move them to the red states? Because in the red states, there are no protections. There's no protection for workers. There's no protection for your wages. There's no unions to protect you. There's no government to protect, watch out for the local community. No one, through the deregulation, they've taken away all of the laws that would protect the average citizen. So basically, the guy right there is saying on Fox News, let's go rob the people in the red states. They're suckers that are still voting for Republicans, so they'll let us rob them blind.
And you know what, Cenk? He might think that they'll be able to do that with absolutely no pushback. But there will be pushback. And look, one thing that I will say about conservative voters is when something is happening that they do not like, COVID shutdowns is a perfect example, they will take to the streets and they won't let up. And that's actually a good quality when it comes to things that really matter, including ensuring that the American people are actually taken into consideration before these corporations are. And just to read a statement from Sagar Enjeti, he's the host of Breaking Points. He is conservative. Here's what he had to say about how conservatives feel about data centers. Data centers are the physical manifestation of all that makes us miserable. It is a monument to our existing misery and a gateway to a future where we're told we're not needed. I don't know how the Republican Party is going to rehab the reputation of AI data centers, considering the fact that we're now on this like multi-year tear of hearing them tell us how excited they are to see human workers replaced, so corporations can maximize their profits even more. But they've got a huge Herculean task ahead of them. So good luck.
Yeah, everybody's waking up at the same time, man. So they're not going to be able to contain us, and they think they can. They think they're not going to change at all, Anna, and they think they're so freaking clever. They're like, we'll just go to Alabama, Mississippi, and rob them. They're poor already. They have no power. Well, look, you keep robbing right-wingers. See how it turns out for you. I mean, look, I saw this haunting. I don't know if you'll think it's haunting, Anna. Comment in social media the other day. Talking about how, the whole donor class keeps robbing us blind. Foreign governments and all these guys that we just mentioned, right? The defense contractors, the AI guys, etc. And they said they think that they could keep robbing the most heavily armed nation on earth, and that they're just gonna be able to dupe us and get away with it. And that particular person said they don't think that it's gonna work out for them the way that they do. And to me, that was a scary comment, because people are now so frustrated, and no matter who they vote for, they always get the same, donor class in charge. And we better resolve this politically before things get ugly and people decide, including and maybe especially the right wing, that they're gonna resolve it in a different way. So I don't think that the establishment understands the rage that's building in this country. And you can't just divide us anymore on right-left BS and think that we'll just fight each other and you'll get away with all your crimes. No, people have seen your crimes. If they don't turn around and we don't vote our way out of this, there's gonna be much, much bigger trouble ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been raising alarm over that, but you're right, they're not gonna change. So just giddy up, because I do think tough times are ahead. Let's move on to our final story. I really wanna cover what a former Justice Department attorney, career Justice Department attorney, has blown the whistle on.
Yeah.
Take it away, Cenk.
Yeah. So remember all those investigations in the college campuses, anti-Semitism, we gotta shut down all free speech. And you know what? We're gonna freeze funding for Harvard, Columbia, and Brown because they have systematic and systemic anti-Semitism. Well, someone that worked in the Trump administration is now telling us that was all lies. What was the real reason they were doing it? Well, Anna, tell us the story.
Well, Cenk, this is based on a whistleblower complaint that was filed Tuesday by a career Justice Department attorney. Her name is Haley Van Arum, an American hero. She's the former career attorney at the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. Okay, so she maintains that Trump's task force, which is tasked with investigating systemic anti-Semitism on Ivy League campuses, basically pressured universities to agree to all sorts of punitive settlements and measures when there was absolutely no evidence at all of abuse or anti-Semitism. Okay, I'm not surprised by this. I'm not shocked by this. This is the disgusting behavior that we've seen carried out against Ivy Leagues. And I want to just say one thing. All of these pathetic, mealy-mouthed Ivy League administrators who caved to Trump knowing that their university campus had no problem with systemic anti-Semitism should resign. They should resign, all of them. They're pathetic, absolutely pathetic. Lawyers accuse administration officials of using campus anti-Semitism as a pretext to cut federal grants to pressure Brown, pathetic, Columbia, pathetic, and Harvard. Trump officials had a predetermined outcome-driven approach to enforcement rather than a fact-based investigative process, it said. While investigators said they did not have the evidence to conclude the schools had broken the law. I want to note, the reason why I didn't call Harvard pathetic is because they actually decided to fight the Trump administration as opposed to immediately cave to them. So for example, at Brown, investigators, including Van Arum, that's the whistleblower, were told in April 2025 of a plan to systematically interview Middle East studies professors, particularly Muslim faculty, to see if they would say anything that could be labeled anti-Semitic, the document states. So in other words, while there wasn't a systemic anti-Semitism problem on these campuses, clearly there's a systemic anti-Muslim bias in our governmental institutions, namely in the Trump administration. So think about that. Think about like the feds coming into your university and demanding to interview your Muslim professors to see if they say anything that might hurt Israel's feelings. And again, they couldn't prove anything. They did do this. They carried this out. They did these interviews of Muslim professors. They didn't find anything. Van Arum and other DOJ assignees repeatedly warned that funding suspensions lacked legal basis and that evidence did not support findings of violations at Brown. In the cases of Columbia and Harvard, no complete investigation was even conducted. Now, Jamie Raskin wrote a strongly worded letter to Harmeet Dillon about this. I'm just referencing it to say that your letters mean absolutely nothing. I know you guys write your letters hoping that you'll get some positive recognition for it, but your letters lead to no change and you don't deserve positive recognition for it. Actually do something. Other than that, we need to move on. Look, Trump on January 29th of 2025 issued a directive to target anti-Semitism on these college campuses. He later increased it from 5 university campuses to 60 university campuses. And federal agencies began withholding billions of dollars in contracts and grants to pressure these schools into doing what Israel wants. That's what this is really about. That's what this is really about.
Yeah.
So elite universities soon began reaching settlements, starting with the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia University in July. As I mentioned earlier, Harvard University was an exception. They actually decided to challenge the administration's actions in court. In September, a federal judge ruled in Harvard's favor that the government illegally froze more than $2 billion in federal grants and contracts, a decision the government is appealing. Some universities paid the government millions of dollars. Others paid nothing but agreed to policy or personnel changes that satisfied Israel because we're an occupied country. But back to you, Cenk.
Yeah, so I want to go through the different universities because there's so many interesting things in there that I discovered through this piece, and then come back to the issue of Israel and their assets inside our government. So first on Brown, Van Arum says we investigated and there was no evidence that they'd done anything wrong. She tells her boss, and her boss says, no, the administration doesn't want to hear that. So since we have no evidence, go pretend that we do, so you could force them into a settlement. And Brown falls for it and gives them a $50 million settlement. They didn't know that there was no evidence at all. It was totally fabricated. But by the way, Brown should know that there was no evidence because it's their campus, but they got scared, we think. But there's another factor here, which is gonna lead us to Columbia in a second. But first on Harvard. I found out why they didn't give in. I gave Harvard a ton of credit because I thought, wow, look at that. They're standing up to these fake charges of anti-Semitism. I'm a little surprised by that, given how they cracked down on the protesters as well, right? But it turns out there was a reason why. Because the administration wanted a lot of things from them, a legal, financial settlement to be able to manipulate their Middle Eastern history to make it more pro-Israel. In other words, for them to literally lie, but they requested that in every instance. But I was like, I don't think that alone is going to do it. And it turns out, no, there was one other thing they asked of Harvard. To put their endowment, which is gigantic, in a place where it could be seized by the government. And Harvard's like, no, we're not letting you seize our, I don't know if it's up to 40 billion now or 70 billion. There's some monstrous endowment that they have. So they were so scared that would get seized. That's why they didn't agree to the deal. I mean, I'll take it, but that was their actual motivation. Okay, now back to Colombia. They say, okay, we're gonna cut 400 million in funding. So why don't you, with no evidence, nothing, your chance of winning in court is like 99.9%. And in return for us not cutting the 400 million, we want you to give us $200 million settlement. Well, who the hell would do that deal? You have an excellent chance of winning in court and you're gonna give them 50% of the money you would have gotten anyway? That doesn't make any sense. But Colombia's like, oh, right away, sir. Please come in and totally change our curriculum. And they gave the money. Why? Because the New York Times hilariously omits from its story the Israeli lobby. The Israeli lobby drove almost all of this, and yes, Colombia has board members who are radical Zionists. So they wanted to change their curriculum to make it more pro-Israel and lie to their students. They wanted to shut down all protests against Israel. So Colombia is like, oh golly gee, they're twisting our arm. Give them the money, yeah, and bring in their thought police. Absolutely, no one protests Israel on Columbia campus. That's because the board is in on it. And prove me wrong, board, prove me wrong. No, they're not gonna prove me wrong because we're absolutely right. And then they go on a fishing expedition to try to smear Muslim professors. What I wanna know, Anna, is who are the Israeli assets inside our government that gave the order to try to entrap Muslim professors on behalf of Israel? And we're not gonna get those answers because the entire government is infiltrated by Israeli assets, including at the very top. Donald Trump has gotten over $300 million from an Israeli family. And we're all pretending that that doesn't affect them. Our reporters are so comically in the tank for a different country that they're like, I didn't notice that the Israeli lobby was the #1 lifetime donor to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell and almost all of our leaders. I can't see anything, I'm a reporter. Oh my God, some of these universities actually love the idea of doing crackdowns on their American and non-American students on behalf of Israel. I can't see it at all. I can't hear it, and I definitely can't say it. So that's what our comical press is, our government that is infiltrated by Israel at every level. And now you see it with your own eyes. And by the way, the courts, when they finally went to court in the Harvard cases, Anna explained to you, the judges laughed them out of the courtroom. Thank God there aren't Israeli assets, as far as we know, inside the court system yet. I hate to give them ideas, but for now the courts are holding, and the courts are saying there is no evidence of systemic anti-Semitism at all. You made this up completely. So then who made it up? Who made it up? And the reality is there is a deep state, and it works for a different country, and is constantly targeting Americans to take away their freedom of speech, to arrest people as they did on those campuses who dare to protest Israel, and to take away your rights so that you bow and surrender to a foreign nation. We should find every one of those assets and remove them from our government.
Agreed.
All right, when we come back, thank you, Anna. When we come back, we've got 2 doctors who were in Israel, in Gaza, and a Jewish American doctor and a Muslim American doctor, and their stories are haunting. It's part of a new movie out that everyone's talking about. We'll interview those doctors when we return. All right, welcome to the Revolution. Cenk Uygur hosting tonight. So there's an amazing new movie out called American Doctor. It's from Oscar-nominated and Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Po-Si Tang. And it documents a Palestinian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian doctor, all Americans, that went to Gaza. It is a harrowing story. We have two of those doctors that we're going to talk to, but I want you to get a sense of the context of this. So let's watch the Watermelon Pictures created American Doctor movie trailer.
I want to take you through what Gaza looks like when a hospital's totally overwhelmed. You're getting waves of patients. Who do you prioritize? What do you have to treat them? You got no pain medicine to give the people whose legs have been blown off.
3 surgeons all working on one little girl for what, 2.5 hours? And she's probably gonna lose her right leg, and her left arm.
And she's starting to wake up. Let's get her warm. As a Jewish physician, I knew nothing about Gaza. Like most Americans, I thought everybody out here were nothing but terrorists because that's what I was told.
I'm not Israeli, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Christian, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Jewish. I don't really have any connection to it. But as an American, I just don't want my government involved in crimes.
I'm a Palestinian. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm a human being. I'm a US doctor who wants to see babies like my babies not be killed anymore.
What surprised me most was how the carnage was focused on journalists, healthcare workers, and children. This bomb. Where was that?
That bomb hit the building.
There was a 15-year-old kid ready for discharge that was incinerated.
And if I had gone down and been changing that kid's dressing, there would have been 3 bodies and I would have been one of them.
When they hit a hospital, that's a deep tragedy that people will feel in the community for the foreseeable future. We're just asking that hospitals not be targeted. Why that conversation is derailed in the United States is beyond me.
We do not have to accept that as Americans. The United States could stop sending jet fuel, bombs, all sorts of weapons. This is a political problem. We need a political solution.
We're a good pair. If you talk intelligently and I talk emotionally.
It's on us to make sure that their stories are told. I couldn't go to Palestine. I got rejected. And then I come back to the United States and get detained by the Department of Homeland Security.
This is what my tax dollars did. What your tax dollars did. What my neighbor's tax dollars did. They have the right to know the truth. Thoreau's the right one to listen to. He is about fairness, and he is about doing the right thing.
You know we're not dating, right? You don't have to talk me up this much. I just met her 5 minutes ago. Yeah.
All right, joining me now is 2 of those doctors that you just saw there, Dr. Mark Perlmutter and Dr. Thayer Ahmad. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you for going there and doing this heroic service to begin with. Dr. Perlmutter, let me start with you. What did you expect when you went, and what did you get instead?
What I expected was almost what I saw. I knew going there that the population was 50% children. And so I fully anticipated that when my government drops a 2,000-pound bomb using Israeli jets as proxies on a school, on a playground, on an apartment building, that way more than 50% of the casualties are going to be children. And in fact, 90 to 95% of our patients were toddlers. And I went into Gaza anticipating that, and that's what I saw.
So let me stay with you for one more second there. So what motivated you to sign up for this? Because this is an extraordinary thing to do. I mean, you're literally risking your life and going into a situation that is, very difficult to say the least. So what made you want to do it?
I've been doing global surgery missions for 30 plus years. I was at Ground Zero, I was at Haiti 5 times, starting the day the earthquake hit, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was anticipating a high number of casualties. But to your point, my motivation was that I didn't want my tax dollars to pay for the murder of children. And that's functionally what's going on there. I felt guilty. that my government was giving, loaning jets, giving jet fuel, donating bombs, that my ex-UN ambassador was writing the words, finish them off, on a bomb that was going to fall into a playground. I knew that Amazon was helping fund the development of a program that would follow children home from the playground to their apartment building at the end of the fast during Ramadan, knowing that little boys would go home to their fathers and they would blow up the building, hoping to kill the father, at the chance, just a small chance, that was a Hamas fighter. When my tax dollars pay for the largest pediatric homicide in my lifetime, I felt that I had to be part of the solution.
That's amazing. Dr. Ahmed, tell us about your experience. First, you got blocked, so tell us what happened there and what happened afterward.
Yeah, I'm somebody who's been working in all parts of Palestine and in the Middle Eastern conflict areas since Operation Cast Lead took place in Gaza in 2009, when 1,200 Palestinians were killed and 300 kids. And so this is an area that I'm very familiar with. I know most of the hospitals in all of Palestine. I know many of the healthcare workers. And so when we went in 2024, after the genocide had started, I was able to enter because the Egyptian crossing was open. And we were able to go inside of Nasser Hospital. And the only reason that I left Nasser Hospital, which is in southern Gaza in Khan Yunis, is because the Israeli military surrounded the hospital with their tanks. And the entire hospital had to essentially shut down. Over the next weeks, the people that I worked with were abducted by the Israeli military. And 2 of the people that I worked with are still in Israeli dungeons without charge. And then, as we exited, the Israeli military then stormed Rafah and took control of the border. And so every single medical delegation now was going to be subjected to the scrutiny of Israeli soldiers. And every Palestinian, regardless of if they were born in the United States like I was, or if you were born in the UK, if your parents or your grandparents happen to be born in Palestine, you are going to be blocked by the Israeli military from entering into Gaza and working alongside your colleagues. And that's exactly what's happened to me 5 consecutive times. Most recently, July 29th, a few weeks ago. And it's just a very racist policy. I mean, I don't know how else to sort of explain it. I don't think you see that anywhere else, where they will say, where was your mom born? Where was your grandfather born? Yeah, you're going to be denied, despite you having the credentials and you having the resume to be able to go in there and work alongside your colleagues.
Well, I'm not overly surprised by that. Israel runs a very literal racist state. It says treats Palestinians differently. Obviously, if you're in the occupied territories, very, very differently. And so, Dr. Ahmed, let me stay with you on, so what happens when a hospital gets shut down? What happens to all the sick patients inside, the ones that are hooked up to machines? It's a literal question, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really important one, but I think most Americans aren't privy to the sort of devastation that will take place. The Israeli military did this for every hospital. And so I think it's very clear what the objectives were, but it's important for people to understand this is an implemented policy, not some one-off general or commander going rogue. What they'll do is they first will get inch closer to the hospital with the tanks. They will shell the surrounding neighborhoods, and then they will surround the hospital. After that, they will lay siege to this hospital, meaning they will not allow anybody to leave, and they will not allow anyone to arrive. So ambulances who have wounded people because there are bombs being dropped everywhere will not be able to bring sick patients to that hospital. And then all of the wounded and the doctors and the nurses who are in this hospital will be deprived food, water, and oftentimes eventually electricity and fuel for the generators to keep the lights on. And then, as the military is sort of behaving more aggressively and wants to take over the hospital, there will be shelling. At Shifa Hospital, for example, in November of 2023, they shelled the solar panels on the roof of the hospital, killing people in that process and shutting off the electricity to 38 babies in incubators. 8 of them died in that incident alone. And then eventually, as the people are inside of this hospital, they will slowly coordinate where they will have one by one people exiting. Some of them getting shot when they exit the compound of the hospital, some of them being abducted, and some of them being told to just walk on foot for miles to go towards the south. Eventually, they raid the hospital. And while they're doing this, Cenk, this is, again, something that absolutely crushes healthcare workers, is they will go through parts of the hospital, different departments, and they will just shoot the ultrasound machines. They will destroy parts of the hospital. They allow sewage to overflow. And in this process, as you can imagine, tons of people will die, whether they are patients because they didn't get the treatment that they needed, or they are healthcare workers because they got in and somehow they got in front of an Israeli soldier, or there will be people who are abducted. And we've seen this time and time again. This is the script. All of the hospitals, almost all of the hospitals in the Gaza Strip suffered the similar fate. And if you are familiar with Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, the famous pediatrician who wrote 2 op-eds in the New York Times, that's what happened to him in his northern pediatric hospital that he was the director of.
Yeah, so I mean, I remember the propaganda before the Iraq war about how Saddam had taken kids off the incubators, and it turns out the Israelis are doing it, and fairly systematically. And you know, if you're ever wondered, like, are you sure it's a genocide? You destroy life-saving equipment if you want to kill innocent people, not if you want to target terrorists. And so there's no question at all. And so, but your stories are all harrowing. Dr. Perlmutter, you talked about infanticide on a scale you haven't seen in your lifetime. 23,000 children are being killed at a minimum in Gaza. And that I've been in debates where I've asked people to visualize the 36 kids that were killed on October 7th. They're playing with their moms or drinking milk and cookies, and how heartbreaking it is that those 36 were killed. And then I asked them to visualize the 23,000 children killed in Gaza. And so unfortunately, of course, our press and our government have not treated them the same. But one of the questions that comes up is, come on, are they really killing kids on purpose? It's all got to be an accident, right? So let me ask you broadly first. All 23,000 kids killed in accident, or was it something else?
So we can address that several ways, and without even commenting on the deliberate restriction of food and medicine and money from coming into the country. On my way out the first time, there was 31 miles of trucks, 8 abreast, 18-wheeler trucks, that were not allowed into the country. And that's when the border was still open at the end of May of 2024 on my first trip to Gaza. That's enough 18-wheeler trucks to surround Gaza 5 times. And those supplies were not allowed in. On my trip in the second time, my microsurgical instruments, the instruments that I own personally that I used to sew nerves and blood vessels together, they were stolen by the IDF. The antibiotics that I tried to sneak in were all confiscated. We weren't allowed to bring in a second jar of peanut butter. We're not allowed to bring in $10 more than the fare it costs us to go from the West Bank through Israel into Gaza and back again with visa fees and bus fees. So we were deprived. We were not allowed to be vehicles for medicine, money, or food. And that the hospitals were so deprived. When I got there the first trip, I bought and brought with me 700 pounds of titanium and steel implants. And they were gone in the first week. That's how deprived the hospitals were before I got there. Now, 700 pounds, for those who don't know, I haven't put in 700 pounds of implants in my entire professional career in the United States. That's how much was gone in the first week. So it's an insane amount of shortage of medical supplies. Now let's talk to the direct trauma of kids. I personally saw 2 children that shot in the head and chest, not arbitrarily, exactly where I would put my stethoscope and exactly on the side of the temple. And I spoke to a father who brought his kid in to the emergency room, and he's crying, of course. And he's crying, and I'm trying to get through a translator what he's saying. And he goes, if they were truly after Hamas, then why didn't they kill me? I'm 24 years old. They could have killed me. And he felt his kid get pulled out of his hand the first time, thinking that he just stepped into a ditch while they're walking to get water. He looks 10 feet away and his kid is blown 10 feet away, and he sees his kid get shot in the head the second time as he's running towards him. And the Israeli soldier is climbing back in his Bradley fighting vehicle, giving him the Middle Eastern equivalent of a middle finger and laughing at him. The kid was deliberately murdered, deliberately assassinated, and he had the option of killing the young adult male, but chose not to do so. So the psychological effect, the horrible psychological effect that's deliberately inflicted on Palestine is part of what I so honestly feel to be called Israel's final solution for the Palestinians.
So how old was that kid again that got
5 to 6. It's hard to tell. It's the first baby who I've ever held the brains of. I rolled him over to do a trauma check, and he's missing his entire spine. His heart and his lungs are blown out at the back of his chest. And his father still brought him in. And on that same night, there was a second child with the same exact spectrum of injuries, shot twice. And that doesn't happen by accident. You just don't get shot twice with a sniper rifle by accident.
Yeah.
So let me point out one more thing to you, if I can just expand on that. Fro Sidwa, the other doctor that went with us, did an assessment and a poll of 100 doctors, American doctors that went there. And 83% of the doctors saw a child shot in the head or chest every day they were there. And that's in every hospital across a whole year's worth of assessment. So,
wait, let me get that right.
Wasn't there to say that again?
Let me get that right. 83% of American doctors that went to Gaza saw a child shot in the head or chest every day?
Correct.
And so when you say shot in the head or the chest, does that imply intentional snipers shooting young children?
100%.
It's snipers, it's the drones, what they would call quadcopters in Gaza. Don't forget that the shelling from the tanks would have these bullets inside of them. That's how Hind Rajab was killed. So there's a lot of weaponry being used in the Gaza Strip right now that we all would see in these hospitals. And it's always tough to say, like, what exactly did this come from? But it's very easy to understand that this was the Israeli military continuing to encroach in Gaza and continuing to try to force people out of their homes and out of the Gaza Strip. Honestly, they kept pushing them further south while we were all there. And then eventually they started going south towards where they told the people to seek refuge in. And so I think Mark's point is something that most of us, even him, he's one of the most senior, experienced global health providers that you'll find in the world. And what he saw there, it's not very typical. It's very clear that there was a war on children. There was a war on Palestinian children.
So just yesterday, Israel finally admitted that they did murder Hind Rajab. There's a 5-year-old stuck in the car, and they'd already killed her family in the car, and then they waited for the ambulance to arrive, and they killed everyone in the ambulance and Hind Rajab. I think fired over 300 times into that car to make sure that everyone, including the 5-year-old, was slaughtered. And obviously killing healthcare workers is another war crime, and that happens far, far too regularly inside Israel. The program that Dr. Perlmutter referred to is Where's Daddy, where they wait for someone to come home before they kill them so that their family dies with them. So Dr. Perlmutter, come back to you on that. So whenever we talk about this on the show, and it's not just us, of course, all of Israel's critics that point out these issues, the number one charge we're met with pretty much 100% of the time is none of it is true, and you are all anti-Semites for saying it. Now, you're a Jewish American doctor. So what's your response to that?
So I have Jewish heritage. I'm agnostic myself, but it's not about Muslims versus Jews. This has never, ever, since the 1930s, when this actually started, it has never been a Muslim versus Jew event. Modern Zionism since the 40s has evolved into simply, I want your land and I'm willing to kill your children to get it. And that's what we're seeing, plain and simple. It is not a fictitious collection of Islamic jihadists. It is not Islamic terrorists. And indeed, the terrorism in the Middle East was started by Zionists, and it's continued by Zionists, fully with American government support, by the way. The United States Congress building is the most occupied territory by Israel. It's not the West Bank, it's not Gaza, it's the US Congress building. And they own our legislatures, including Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, which I hope get voted out of office. So they're all prostitutes for the Israeli lobby.
All right, that is very clear. But I want to stick with what Dr. Ahmed said about your experience, Dr. Mark, because you've been in so many war zones and seen so many tragedies. Does this really truly stand out? Because the Israelis say, no, this is actually the most minor of any of these kind of incidents, and the only reason why anybody's picking on Israel is because they're anti-Semites, etc. So, how does this compare to the other places you've been?
So it's easy to paint your atrocities as anti-Semitism when you equate and conflate Zionism to Semitism. So if I say anything against Israel, I'm automatically insulting the Judaic religion. And Judaism is a religion that's thousands of years old, based on love and tolerance, and Zionism is a late 19th century political philosophy only, has nothing to do with religion, designed to give Jews a homeland, but not at the expense of the lives of those who lived there prior to the European Jews coming. And that's been what it's been since the 1940s. It has always been a functional political land grab under the pretense of protecting the Jewish religion, and it has never done that. In fact, the most dangerous place for a Jew to live in the world is in Israel.
Yeah. So, of course, I agree with you. And 63% of Jewish Americans are against the current Israeli government, and yet, the radical Zionists continue to hide behind them and say, no, they did it. No, they didn't do it, right. And they didn't agree to it, and they're not Israeli. They're Jewish Americans. It's completely different, and they largely agree with us. So now, Dr. Ahmed, Golda Meir had that famous haunting line about how she said, we'll never forgive the Palestinians for making us kill their children, which I remember Dr. Perlmutter basically is saying, like, that's the excuse, like, you made us kill your kids. But killing kids is a very particular kind of war crime, and it's so extreme. So what do you think happening there? Why are they, kind of giving away the game? Because like, if you wanted to keep up the pretense that, we're just defending ourselves and golly gee, there was nothing we could do, you would target more of the middle-aged men, but they're targeting with snipers kids. So why do you think they're doing that?
Well, I think if anybody's sort of been into how the Israeli military conducts itself in any sort of operation, in any sort of combat, this is a trend that we continue to see. And what happened in Gaza in terms of the genocide, it was just on a larger scale. They've got this idea of deterrence that they've always tried to deploy. And I'm not a military expert. Cenk, you know a lot more about this than I do, but I can only speak about it from the public health perspective. And what's happened very clearly, whether it's Operation Cast Lead or Operation Protective Edge in 2014, or any of sort of the ways that the Israeli military engages with Palestinians or Lebanese people, or now Syrians for that matter, and definitely Irani people, is they want to make the cost as high as possible. They want people in the region, they want society to fall apart. And how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that you do that is you attack hospitals and healthcare workers like we discussed. The other way that you can do that is all of the people that are exposing this, you kill them. Those are the journalists that you saw, over 200 in Gaza were killed. And then, of course, which they know exceptionally well, is you go after the children. You do the most horrific thing possible. You tear families apart and you go after the most vulnerable people. It's the children, of course, it's the women, it's of course the professionals within the society. Rifat al-Harir, a famous Palestinian academic, killed in December of 2023. And so this is all about making sure that the cost is very high and that the Palestinians are left with only one option, and that is flee the land, be ethnically cleansed from it. And that's how you get a genocide committed. But this is not new. This is something that we saw. I mean, when Operation Cast Lead happened, a third of the people who had died, a third of the Palestinians who were killed by the Israeli military were kids. That was 2009. That was the first year of Barack Obama's presidency. And so it's not like this is just something switched, which is why I always struggle with the depiction that this is a one-man horror show. This is Netanyahu, and once we get rid of him, then all will be good. No, this is a problem with that institution, the military institution of the government of Israel. They've never had to be held accountable. You mentioned what happened with the killing of Hind Rajab, and this idea of an investigation, that's fine and dandy. But if there is no accountability as a result of that, or if they blame it on a dead soldier already, a soldier who's already been killed, maybe he was killed in Lebanon or in Palestine, they blame it on that person, and there's no real accountability as a result of this, then there will be more kids that will be killed. This is, again, I feel like a broken record having worked in this area for so long, but the only way for us to make sure that we can protect not just the children of Palestine, but all of the future generations, whether it's, anywhere in the world where war is being engaged on, it's important that the Israeli military be held accountable for their behavior. Everybody be held accountable, right? I mean, that's what we want, accountability. We want justice. And the way to do that is to make sure that when you do something that violates international humanitarian law or international law, that there are consequences as a result of that.
Yep.
And I might add that that's not just the Israelis that have to be held accountable. The US government is often labeled as complicit, but we're not complicit, we're causative. We are 100% enabling the murder of children. Everybody in our legislature knows the cost of approving money in the last bill that they just approved, billions of dollars, simply to buy more weapons to drop on more Palestinian families. The ceasefire is going on now, and 1,000 people have died since the ceasefire has been called.
Yeah, I mean, to your point,
and not one Israeli.
Yeah, to your point, Dr. Perlmutter, we're not just occupied, but in a sense, we're being held hostages and forced to fund this mass infanticide, this genocide.
Absolutely.
And
if you don't give me money, if you don't keep giving me money, if you don't vote my way, Senator Schumer and Senator and Hakeem Jeffries, if you don't vote as I tell you to, I will not give you millions of dollars to reinsure your next election. That's all this is about.
Okay, haunting stories. You've got to check out American Doctor. By the way, if you care about this, make sure you watch American Doctor. But if you disagree, watch the movie and see if you can make it through the movie and still have the same opinion. And so many of the Watermelon Pictures movies are the same way. Watch The Voice of Hind Rajab. If you could make it through that movie and say, attaboy Israel, I think they should do more of this. Well, then okay. I mean, at least then you're being intellectually honest. But if you can't even stomach watching these movies, then you know you're on the wrong side. So look, I'll end on this, guys. I talked to a medical group in Dallas that had a lot of doctors that went, American doctors that went to Gaza. And like Dr. Perlmutter, I'm agnostic to atheists, right? But I say, if there is a heaven, it's filled to the room with doctors who went to Gaza. So I thank you from the bottom of our hearts collectively, and I think on this I can speak for almost all Americans. You guys are angels and heroes, and we love you and we cherish you. Thank you for going to save those lives. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your voice, Cenk. Like when it wasn't easy, your voice was pretty loud, and so we appreciate that as Palestinians as well as American doctors. So thank you.
And I'd like to just close on one note. We pale in comparison to the Palestinian doctors and the Palestinian press that's still alive. They're fighting to get the truth out by orders of magnitude greater than we are. They're living it every second of every day.
That is also definitely true, and we have to all collectively work to save them. And this is our country. We need to get it back so we can do what the American people want, which is to do the moral and decent thing and not finance these atrocities. All right, Dr. Mark Perlmutter and Dr. Thayer Ahmad, thank you for doing this and thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so for those of you in the audience, I am going to do a bonus episode for our members So if you want to see that, and I'm going to interact with you guys and read your comments, hit the join button below or tyt.com/join him. Please also check out Anna's interview with Candace Owens about the Tyler Robinson case that was in the members only section last night, because that was powerful and really interesting. So all the members, we'll see you in a minute.